So when I was 25, I had this habit of doing late-night shopping at Target because I worked weird hours. That Saturday, I got there around 10 p.m., thinking I'd grab some cleaning supplies and get out quick. The parking lot was mostly empty, and the whole store had this echo because there weren't many people inside. The lights always seemed a bit too bright at that hour, making the place feel kind of artificial. I grabbed a red cart with one sticky wheel and headed straight to the household section, passing only a couple of tired-looking employees pushing pallets of boxes. There was the hum of the ceiling lights and the beep of one register running up front. I liked shopping at that time because nobody bothered me and I could move fast. I walked past the dish soaps and sponges, running over my list in my head, and that's when I noticed this guy. He was maybe in his 30s, unshaven, with a baseball cap pulled low, sweatshirt sleeves bunched at his wrists, pushing a half-broken cart. His cart was piled with all sorts of stuff. 3 bottles of shampoo, a bag of socks, random food, batteries, 2 phone chargers, plastic storage bins, and a bunch of cleaning sprays. At first, I thought he was just shopping for a big family or something, but the way he was moving was off. He'd grab something, toss it in fast, and then whip the cart around as if he was looking for an exit, not shopping. I slowed down a bit, pretending to check prices, and tried not to make eye contact. I figured he was just having a weird night, maybe in a rush, or maybe he was about to get in line and just wanted to get home. I kept my head down, grabbed a bottle of disinfectant, some paper towels, and tried not to pay attention. But the guy's cartwheels screeched as he made a sharp turn into the same aisle as me. I caught a quick look and noticed his hands were shaking, his knuckles white on the cart handle. There was a smell coming off him, not sweat, more like stale cigarettes mixed with laundry detergent. I glanced away fast and focused on my list, but he lingered at the end of the aisle, pretending to look at the laundry soap while glancing back at me every couple seconds. It set me a little on edge. I told myself to relax and just finish up, but I kept catching him moving fast between aisles, stopping when he saw me, always looking in my direction. The store was so empty it felt like his movements echoed more than they should. I told myself not to get paranoid. I kept to myself, kept moving, just a guy shopping late at night. I checked out the spray bottles, made a little detour over to the light bulb aisle. There was hardly anyone around, just the same 2 workers, one stacking paper goods, the other running inventory on an iPad, not even looking at customers. The guy was still nearby, his shoes squeaking on the tile as he walked. I could hear him even if I didn't look. He muttered to himself once, pushing past a display, and the whole energy was off. I thought about leaving, but I still needed a few things and didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. I figured it would be better to finish up and get out quick. When I turned around to go grab a new mop head, he was suddenly there right next to me. I hadn't heard him come up. He was close enough I could smell his breath. Old coffee, sour and sharp. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Hey, can you help me out?" I stopped, half expecting a question about where something was, but instead he said, "My card isn't working. Can you pay for my stuff? I'll pay you back." He motioned to his overflowing cart. It wasn't just a couple things. There was at least $200 worth of stuff in there, if not more. I just stood there a second, surprised, and shook my head. I told him there was a customer service desk up front. Maybe they could help if his card was having trouble. He nodded but didn't move, just stared at me for a second, lips pressed tight, then finally turned his cart around and walked away, still muttering. I tried to move on, figured that was the end of it, and got my last items as quickly as I could. I started making my way toward the front, checking my phone for the time. But not even 5 minutes later, I was in the cleaning aisle again, heading for the checkout, when he came back, this time standing even closer. He didn't bother with small talk. He said, "You got cash, right? My card won't work. Just pay for this and I'll pay you outside. Come on, man. Help me out." His voice had changed, not just asking, more demanding now, louder than before. He moved into my space, so I had to step back, his cart angled to block me from leaving the aisle. I told him no, firm, but kept it calm, trying not to escalate anything. I looked past him, hoping a worker would walk by, but no one was around. He leaned forward and didn't move. I tried to step around, but he kept his cart in front of me, forcing me to sidestep toward the shelves. His whole posture had changed, shoulders hunched, eyes darting from me to the end of the aisle, like he was weighing his options. I tried to keep my voice steady, told him again to go talk to customer service, that I couldn't help, and started to move past. But he moved with me, following down the aisle, his hand gripping the edge of my cart now, matching my steps. When I refused the third time, he completely lost it. He shoved his cart hard to the side, flipping it over so everything inside crashed to the ground with a loud, echoing noise that bounced down the empty aisles. Bottles rolled across the tile. A pack of batteries burst open. A box of cereal slid under the shelves. I took a step back, unsure of what he'd do next. He started yelling, loud, angry words, his arms flailing. "You think you're better than me?" he screamed. "You're selfish. You see someone struggling and you do nothing. Heartless piece of—" He kept going, louder each time, like he was trying to convince the store as much as he was trying to attack me. A few heads popped out from behind displays. Two people down near the pharmacy froze mid-conversation. A woman with a kid pushed her cart fast toward the exit. Then I saw an employee in a red shirt sprinting toward us, holding a walkie-talkie to his mouth. Another one joined him. Then a manager showed up. His name tag said Carlos. He had a calm tone but a firm voice. "Sir, we need you to lower your voice," Carlos said. "You're scaring people. Let's talk." The man didn't stop. He jabbed his finger toward me, spit flying from his mouth as he shouted, "This guy. He didn't want to help. I just needed a little help. What kind of person just says no like that?" Carlos stood between us now, hands out like a referee. I didn't say anything. I just took 2 steps back toward the main aisle where more people were standing now, phones out, recording. One older guy held his cart sideways like a shield in front of a young woman. The guy kept shouting. It wasn't about me anymore. He was just yelling to yell. Carlos stayed calm but signaled to the walkie-talkie again. I heard him say, "Get security up here. Now." He never took his eyes off the man. I kept backing up until I hit the end cap of the paper goods aisle. Then I just stood there, watching. My hands were shaking. Security came fast. A short woman in a black jacket with asset protection across the back. She talked into her radio, then walked up beside Carlos. Another employee blocked off the aisle entrance. Then I heard it. Carlos saying, "Sir, you need to leave the store now. The police have been called." The guy paused for just a second. You could see it in his eyes. He realized something had changed. Then, without a word, he turned around. I thought he was leaving. But before walking out, he bent down, grabbed something from the mess, one of the bottles of blue cleaning solution, and suddenly flung it hard over his shoulder at me. I saw it coming and ducked. The bottle hit the metal shelf behind me with a hollow thunk and exploded, spraying cleaner all over the floor and down my back. I slipped slightly but caught myself. The smell hit instantly. Sharp, chemical, like bleach and glass cleaner mixed together. The blue liquid dripped down the shelves and soaked into the paper towels on display. Carlos cursed under his breath and stepped toward him, but the man was already halfway to the doors. The security guard didn't chase him. Instead, she spoke into her mic again and waved toward someone outside, probably another guard. Carlos turned to me and said, "Come on, let's get you out of this aisle." He waved over another employee, a kid barely 20, and they walked me up toward the front of the store. Carlos said, "We're really sorry, sir. You're okay?" I nodded but didn't speak. The kid stayed close while I went through self-checkout with my few items. He didn't say much either, just stood there with his arms crossed, glancing around constantly. I noticed more employees in the aisles now, pretending to straighten shelves but really just watching the doors. The store felt different, quiet, but tense. Every beep at the register sounded louder. The lights felt harsher. I kept expecting the guy to come back in, but he didn't. The police came maybe 10 minutes later. 2 officers walked in, one heading toward the back, the other asking for the manager. Carlos pointed them toward me, and I told them everything as clearly as I could. They asked for my name, my contact info, and walked me through the events again. One of them wrote notes while the other nodded silently. When I mentioned the bottle being thrown, they exchanged a glance. They told me they'd review the store's security footage, that this kind of thing was happening more often lately, especially in stores that stayed open late. I asked if they'd catch him. One cop shrugged and said, "If he's done this before, maybe. But if not, who knows?" I left the store still shaking. Drove home with the windows cracked because the smell of that cleaning stuff soaked into my jacket. I kept replaying the moment he raised his voice, the way it went from weird to dangerous in seconds. The way nobody else really got involved, just watched. I tried not to think about how it would have gone if I hadn't ducked. I didn't go back to Target for a while. A few days later, Carlos called me personally. Said the store wanted to check on me. Said they'd ban the guy if he ever showed up again. They mailed me a $50 gift card. I never used it. What stuck with me wasn't the yelling or even the bottle. It was how fast it happened. One minute I was buying sponges. The next, I had someone screaming in my face and throwing things at me. It wasn't just about him. It was the realization that people don't always show you what they're capable of at first. They can seem like they just need a hand, and then they change, quick. Too quick. That's what stays with me. Now I only shop during the day, when the aisles are full and there are more eyes around. It's not paranoia. It's just math. Fewer empty corners. Fewer chances for someone like him to slip through. When I moved to Denver for work last year, I decided to start running in the mornings to explore my new neighborhood. I'd always been a gym person, but I thought outdoor running would help me learn the area. That Thursday, I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and planned a route through City Park and back through the residential streets. It was still dark when I woke up, not totally pitch black, but that time of day when the sky is sort of blue and the streetlights are just starting to turn off. The air in my apartment was chilly, so I had to force myself out of bed. I put on running shorts and an old hoodie, grabbed my phone, and did a quick stretch by the front door. I left my building quietly. The hallway smelled like laundry detergent, and the elevator was empty, just humming and clicking on the way down. Outside, I noticed how silent the street was. No cars, just a few porch lights still on. I took a right onto York Street, my breath already visible. As I jogged toward the park, I tried to get a feel for the place. City Park looked different than during the day. There were big trees, their leaves blowing around the sidewalks, and a thin layer of frost on the grass. I passed 2 women with dogs. One was bundled in a red coat, nodding to music in her headphones. The other had a huge golden retriever sniffing at everything. I gave a little wave, and both of them nodded back but didn't say anything. At the main entrance, I saw an older group standing in a circle on the grass, moving slowly through what looked like Tai Chi. They wore gray sweatpants and puffy jackets. One man had on blue gloves and was talking quietly to a woman with a green scarf. They barely glanced at me as I ran by. The park itself felt safe enough. Street lights lined the path, spaced out but bright, and every so often a car would pass by the edge of the park, its headlights cutting through the trees. It actually felt peaceful. I kept up a steady pace, listening to my shoes hitting the pavement and the birds starting up. I passed a playground with empty swings blowing in the breeze, then a baseball field where two people were throwing a ball back and forth in the outfield. They looked up at me, then back at their game. No one seemed in a hurry. On the other side of the park, I passed by a row of parked cars. There was a food truck setting up for the day, the driver inside stacking boxes and sipping from a thermos. Everything just seemed normal for an early morning in a decent part of town. As I finished the lap through City Park, I started thinking maybe this running thing could become a good routine. My nerves were settling. I pulled my hood up tighter and crossed over to the residential streets to head back. There were tidy lawns, empty driveways, and a couple of kids' bikes tipped over in a yard. Sprinklers were already running on one block, soaking the sidewalk, so I had to hop around the wet patches. A car drove by slow, windows up, nothing unusual. I reached Colfax Street, the last stretch before home, and the sun was just starting to rise behind the buildings, turning the sky orange and gray. On my way back down Colfax Street, I passed a guy in wrinkled clothes who smelled like alcohol. He was standing near a bus stop, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. His hair was messy and his eyes were kind of red. I said good morning like I always do with people I pass while running. He barely looked at me, mumbled something that I couldn't understand. I kept jogging, thinking nothing of it. My mind was already on the hot shower waiting for me at home. About a minute later, I heard footsteps behind me getting closer. At first, I thought maybe it was another runner. I didn't turn around right away. The footsteps sounded heavy and uneven, scraping the sidewalk. I tried to keep my pace steady, hoping it was nothing, but the noise kept getting louder. Finally, I glanced over my shoulder. It was the same man from before, the one in wrinkled clothes. Now he was walking straight toward me, not in a random way, but with purpose. His mouth was set tight, and he kept his eyes locked on me. Something in his expression made me stop running. I took out my headphones and stepped off to the side, suddenly aware of how empty the street felt. He wasn't just wandering anymore. The guy grabbed my sleeve and yanked me toward him, his other hand coming out of his pocket holding a folding knife. The blade flicked open, small but real, and he shoved it close to my stomach. His breath smelled sour, his voice rough. "Give me your money, now." My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to sound steady. I kept my hands up, showed him my empty palms. "I don't have any cash, just my keys and this watch," I said, pointing to the garment on my wrist. He stared at it, looked up at me with angry, desperate eyes. "Take it off," he snapped. I slid it off quick and held it out. He grabbed it, barely looking at it, and stepped back. "Don't call nobody," he said, and then turned and took off, half running, half stumbling in the direction of the train station. For a second, I just stood there in the cold, my arm tingling where he'd grabbed me, the world suddenly very quiet. My head felt empty. Then I realized I was shaking. I heard a voice behind me, soft, cautious. A woman with a big golden retriever was watching from across the street. She walked over slow, holding her phone out. "Are you okay? Do you need to call someone?" I nodded, took the phone, and dialed 911 with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. I told the dispatcher what happened, gave her the location, tried to remember every detail about the guy's clothes, the knife, his face. The woman stayed with me, her dog leaning against my leg. I handed the phone back, thanked her, and waited. It felt like forever, but it was only a few minutes before I heard the sirens. A police car pulled up, lights flashing, then another one. 2 officers stepped out, one of them older and serious, the other young and typing into a tablet. They asked me to go over everything. What the man looked like, what he said, which way he went, what exactly he took. Detective Jones, the older one, wrote everything in a notepad, while the other officer took photos of the street in my ripped sleeve. Jones told me there had been several robberies like this lately, mostly targeting runners and cyclists early in the morning. Same kind of approach, always a weapon, usually a knife. He said it was probably the same group of guys, people with drug issues, looking for fast money or something to pawn. "We're stepping up patrols in the area," he said, "but if you remember anything else, call me directly." He handed me a card and told me to try not to let this ruin running for me. I just nodded. The police drove off, and I started walking home, glancing back every block, feeling like someone might be following me even though the street was empty. I kept thinking about the knife in his face, how fast things had gone from safe to dangerous. When I got home, I locked the door and double-checked the windows, the leftover adrenaline making my hands shake. I sat on the floor and stared at my shoes for a long time before I finally got up and showered. The next few days I didn't run at all. I set my alarm but couldn't make myself get dressed or step outside while it was still dark. I told my boss I needed to work from home for a while. Every time I thought about running, I saw that guy's eyes and the blade of the knife. I tried to convince myself it was just bad luck, that it could have happened to anyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept my curtains closed and checked my door twice before going to bed. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up. I finally told my parents what happened, left out the details so they wouldn't worry too much. But my mom sent me a new pepper spray, and my dad called every night to check in. A week went by, and I was starting to sleep a little better when Detective Jones called me back. He said they'd picked up a guy named Michael Thompson for another robbery 2 neighborhoods over. Same pattern. When they searched him, they found a bunch of stolen stuff. Phones, jewelry, a few watches. He asked if I could come to the station and look at a few items. I went down there after work, the station crowded and noisy, everyone moving with purpose. Jones met me in the lobby and walked me to a small room with a table. There were 6 watches in a plastic bag. My Garmin was on top, my initials scratched on the back. I pointed it out and signed some paperwork. Jones said Thompson had confessed to a couple of the robberies, said he needed the money for pills. I asked what would happen next. "He'll probably get 2 years for armed robbery," Jones said. "That's about average for something like this. You'll have to testify in court, but it should be pretty straightforward." I nodded. There wasn't much else to say. When the case went to court, I wore a suit and answered the prosecutor's questions. Thompson sat at the defense table in a wrinkled shirt, not looking at me. I just told the judge what happened, step by step, and described the knife and the way he grabbed me. It felt strange, like I was talking about something that happened to someone else. The trial lasted less than an hour. Thompson got 2 years. The judge told me I could pick up my watch from the evidence room. I got it back, but I didn't wear it for months. Even after the case was over and I had my watch again, it took a long time to feel safe going for a run. I started with short walks during the afternoon, never with headphones, always looking around. I avoided Colfax Street and only ran on busier trails, always when the sun was up. I texted a friend before and after every run and made sure someone knew where I was going. I bought a new lock for my apartment and put up a camera by the door. Now, almost a year later, I still don't run before sunrise, and I never take the same route 2 days in a row. I tell people when I leave, and I keep my old pepper spray in my hand for the first mile. Sometimes I think about how easy it is for something random to change your habits, how a normal morning can flip into the worst day you've had in years. I keep telling myself it was just bad luck, but I know now that it only takes one moment for everything to feel different. I rarely stopped for coffee before work, but that Tuesday I had an important presentation and needed the caffeine boost. The shopping complex on Oak Avenue had a small coffee shop I'd been to a few times. It was still early, maybe 7:40 in the morning. The air was a bit cool, sky gray and dull. I parked close to the entrance, right in front of the glass windows. I remember thinking the lot was busier than usual, but the shop had this reliable, quiet vibe, so I figured it would be a quick in and out. When I stepped inside, the place was already humming with noise, but not crowded. Just a few people in line, some sitting near the window on their laptops, a couple talking quietly over muffins. I stood behind a guy in business clothes tapping his phone. There was a short woman in a blue jacket ahead of him. I looked at the clock on the wall behind the counter, checking how much time I had before I needed to leave. The line moved quickly, even though a few people were waiting on their orders. I was still half asleep, zoning out to the whir of the espresso machine and the clink of spoons. When it was my turn, I ordered a medium Americano, nothing fancy. The barista was polite, moving with this practiced quickness, no real chit-chat, just the basics. I paid with my card, waited to the side, and watched the cars going by outside. No one else really stood out. Most people just looked tired, same as me. I got my coffee in a little under 5 minutes. The shop smelled like burnt toast and old newspapers. There was a strange tension in the air, but nothing I could put my finger on. Sometimes, on busy mornings, there's a rushed mood that gets everyone moving faster than they need to. I checked my phone, scrolled my emails. I noticed my hand was a little shaky, nerves from the presentation maybe, or just too little sleep. I pushed out the door with my shoulder, letting it close behind me with a dull thud. Outside, the wind had picked up, tossing a few leaves along the curb. I walked to my car, coffee cup warming my hand, briefcase tucked under my arm, trying not to spill anything on my shirt. The parking lot looked normal enough, people coming and going, a couple of empty shopping carts left by the curb. My car was exactly where I left it, dark sedan, a little dusty. I unlocked it, climbed in, and set my coffee in the holder. I turned the ignition and listened to the engine settle into a soft hum. For a second, I just sat there, enjoying the heat blowing out of the vents, relieved I'd made good time. I checked the clock on the dashboard, realizing I was actually ahead of schedule for once. I ran through my mental checklist for the day: laptop, notes, spare shirt in the back, everything where it should be. I put the car in reverse, ready to back out. That's when I noticed a dark SUV pull up directly behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it, just another shopper or someone waiting for a spot. The SUV was a late model, probably black or dark blue, windows deeply tinted so you couldn't see inside at all. It stopped close, a little too close. I glanced in my rearview mirror. The driver hadn't parked in any spot, just idled right there, completely blocking my exit. I waited a few seconds, figuring maybe they were just dropping someone off or waiting for someone to come out. I could see movement inside, just vague shapes, nothing distinct. My fingers tapped restlessly on the steering wheel. A minute passed, maybe a little more. The SUV didn't move, didn't even inch back to give me space. There were empty parking spots just a few spaces down, plenty of room all over the lot. I checked my side mirrors, craning my neck to see if there was a reason for them to be right behind me. Nothing. Just the SUV, lights on, engine running. The longer I looked, the more deliberate it seemed. I thought maybe I was overthinking, but I couldn't shake the weird feeling crawling up my spine. I waited, watching for any sign that the driver would shift or pull away, but nothing changed. I tried to give them a polite beep of my horn, a quick tap, nothing aggressive. The SUV didn't react at all. I waited again, maybe another 30 seconds, then gave a longer honk, trying to make it clear I needed to get out. Still, there was no response. No movement from the driver. No window rolled down. Not even a wave of apology. Just the steady idling, the dark glass staring back at me. The sound of the engine and the way the car sat so perfectly lined up behind mine made it impossible to back out or squeeze past. I checked my surroundings again. Cars were pulling in and out of the lot, but no one seemed to notice what was happening. A couple walked by, carrying bags, not glancing our way. I felt the muscles in my neck tensing. I tapped my horn again, this time holding it for a good 2 seconds. The sound echoed across the parking lot. Still, the SUV didn't budge. I stared at the tinted windows, trying to see inside, but it was impossible. Whoever was in there wanted to stay hidden. I couldn't make out a face or even the shape of a head. Just the vague outline of someone in the driver's seat, unmoving, watching. The minutes started to pile up. I could see I was wasting time now. My coffee had gone cold. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes flicking from the mirror to the SUV. The lot wasn't empty, but it felt like no one would care what was happening right in front of them. The SUV's positioning was too precise to be a mistake. There was no reason for them to sit there unless they wanted to block me in. And still, they did nothing. No gesture, no sign they planned to move at all. I was reaching for my phone to call the shopping center security when the SUV's front doors opened. 2 men stepped out, moving fast but controlled, not like guys who were lost or confused. They were dressed in dark athletic gear, track pants, zip-up jackets, sneakers. No logos, nothing flashy. Their movements were coordinated, like they already knew what each of them was supposed to do. One of them walked directly toward my driver's side window, while the other circled to the passenger side. I kept my doors locked out of habit, and I was suddenly very thankful for that. Both of them reached for the handles at the same time. I saw them pull once, twice, and then look at each other. The driver tried again, harder this time, while the other one started knocking on the glass, his knuckles hitting the window hard. I couldn't hear their words clearly, but their tone was sharp, urgent. They weren't asking nicely. The man on the driver's side leaned down, staring at me through the window. He shouted something again and pointed at the lock. His face was tight, eyes focused. The other guy had stepped back from the passenger door slightly, glancing around the lot, checking for movement. I could feel the pressure rising in my chest. I was gripping the steering wheel without realizing it, frozen for a second while they kept knocking, pulling, circling the car like they were waiting for me to make a mistake. I slammed my hand against the horn, holding it down. The sound cut through the lot like a siren. I didn't let up. I pressed harder, as if that would make it louder. Both men flinched, then looked around quickly. A woman across the parking lot turned her head. One of the men waved at her like he was trying to play it off, but she was already walking faster in the other direction. I kept honking. The one at my window hit the glass with the side of his fist. Not a punch, just enough to make a sound. He yelled again, louder this time, but I still couldn't understand the words. They didn't look high, didn't look drunk. They looked like they knew what they were doing, and that was worse. I kept honking. The horn filled the car, vibrating through the seat, through my hand. The guy on the passenger side looked back at the SUV. He said something to the other man, too low for me to hear. Then, just as quickly as they'd come, they turned and walked back to their vehicle. Not rushed, not panicked, just done. They got back in without looking at me. The SUV backed up slowly, then turned and pulled away, disappearing down the side exit of the lot. I didn't move for a full minute. I just sat there, hands still on the horn, though I'd stopped pressing it. My fingers were locked in place, like my whole body was stuck in that moment. The coffee in the cup holder had spilled slightly when I hit the horn, and I could smell it cooling. My throat was dry. I glanced around the lot, trying to see if anyone was watching, if anyone had noticed. A man was walking toward the shop with headphones in. A woman was loading groceries into her trunk across the row. Life kept going. I drove to work with my jaw clenched and one hand tight on the wheel. I didn't even touch the coffee again. I called the police from the office as soon as I parked, sitting in my car with the window up and the engine still running. I told the dispatcher what happened, every detail I could remember. She transferred me to an officer who asked if I could come down to make a formal report. I said yes. He told me there had been similar incidents in nearby shopping centers recently. Men in SUVs targeting lone drivers, usually women, usually early in the morning. They hadn't hurt anyone yet, but there'd been a few successful carjackings. No arrests. They pulled the security footage later that day. One of the officers called me the next morning to say they'd reviewed it. The SUV was visible, but the license plate wasn't. It was either obscured or had something covering it. They couldn't make an ID. The men had their hoods up when they got out. No clear facial images. No way to track them down. I kept going over it in my head. What would have happened if I'd opened the door? If I'd stepped out before I noticed? If I'd just assumed they were trying to talk to me? The officer said they were probably after the car, maybe my wallet or phone. Said I did the right thing by not unlocking the doors. But I still think about it every time I pull into a parking lot, especially when it's early and quiet and I'm alone. I switch to making my coffee at home. It's not as good, not even close. That shop on Oak Avenue still has the best Americano in town. I know because a coworker brought one in a few weeks after it happened and I recognized the cup instantly. But I don't go back there. I don't even drive past it if I can help it. There's no reason to avoid it. It wasn't the coffee shop's fault. It's just a place. But that's not what matters. Sometimes it's not about logic. It's about not wanting to feel like prey again. When my son Ethan turned 16 last summer, I decided to take him and his little sister Emma out for a shopping trip at Riverside Plaza Mall. Ethan had been saving up for months to buy a new game console, and Emma wanted clothes, mostly stuff with cats on them or glitter, which I honestly didn't understand. Ethan's friend Lucas tagged along. They were glued to each other all summer, talking about games and YouTube and things I mostly pretended to understand. I work as a social worker, so I tend to notice small things about people, habits, expressions, the way they look at kids, especially when something isn't right. Most times it's just a tired parent or a cranky teen, but sometimes you get a feeling that you can't just ignore. We parked on the second floor of the parking garage and walked in through the west entrance. It was busy for a Saturday, families everywhere, kids yelling, the smell of pretzels in the air. The first hour was just normal. Ethan and Lucas stopped in front of the game store, arguing about PlayStation versus Xbox. Emma begged for Starbucks, and I gave in, since I was already tired and it was only 11. I kept an eye on the kids and watched people move through the crowds. That's when I saw him. He was maybe in his early 20s, well-dressed, expensive shoes, sharp haircut. He looked out of place for Riverside Plaza, where you mostly see parents in sweatpants and teenagers in hoodies. I saw him standing by the cell phone kiosk, talking on his phone, but it was more like he was pretending to talk. He was glancing around, scanning the crowds, but not looking at the products, not shopping. At first, I thought he was just waiting for someone. He was close enough that I could see his eyes flick over to us when the kids laughed. I paid attention, because I've been trained to. We walked past the food court, and I noticed he was walking too, a few yards behind. He kept the phone up to his ear but was moving at the same pace we were, drifting from one side of the walkway to the other, always glancing our way. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or just bored. But every time I glanced back, he was still there, phone to his face, watching us. I stopped by a bench to adjust Emma's backpack and pretended to check my messages. He walked past, still pretending to talk, but slowed his steps. I watched his reflection in the window of the jewelry store. He didn't go inside. He just hung back and watched. We moved on to the electronics store. Ethan and Lucas wanted to look at games, and I followed them in, keeping Emma close. The man stayed outside, leaning against the wall next to the entrance, glancing in through the window. He wasn't shopping. He didn't look at his phone once while we were inside, just stared in, always keeping the same distance. I felt something crawling in the back of my mind, that sense you get when someone is focused on you for the wrong reasons. We left the store, and I checked again. He was following, not close enough to bump into us, but never out of sight. We went into a shoe store next. I watched him circle around and pause by the entrance, pretending to look at the sale rack but never touching anything. I started to test it, turning down an aisle we hadn't planned on visiting. Within a minute, he was there too, standing off to the side, fake laughing into his phone, watching us in the mirror behind the counter. I glanced at the kids. Ethan and Lucas were busy arguing about shoes. Emma was looking at sparkly sandals. They hadn't noticed anything. I watched the man out of the corner of my eye. He kept a careful distance, never looking directly at me, but never letting us out of sight. I led the kids into a clothing store, a place we wouldn't normally stop. We browsed near the back, and after about 60 seconds, I saw him again, pretending to sift through t-shirts by the big front windows. He was closer this time, only about 20 feet away, but always with that phone up, like he needed to make sure he had an excuse if anyone asked what he was doing. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, that this wasn't just a guy killing time at the mall or waiting for a ride. I looked for security but didn't see anyone near the entrance. I made a point to linger by the checkout, pretending to consider buying something. He waited, pacing slowly near the racks at the front. When we finally left, I saw him turn and follow again, moving through the crowd in the same slow, careful way, always keeping the same distance, always with the phone pressed to his face. The kids still didn't notice. I tried not to let them see that I was watching him, but I kept glancing over my shoulder, tracking him in the glass and the reflections in the store windows, feeling the pressure of his eyes on us with every step. At the checkout counter, I positioned myself to keep the kids close and have a clear view of the man. He was still on his phone, but now he was openly watching us, not even pretending to shop anymore. The line moved slow, and I could hear Emma complaining about her legs hurting, asking if we could go home. I nodded, just wanting to get out. I paid for our things, barely glancing at the receipt, and told the kids we were leaving right away. Ethan looked confused and asked why we were rushing, but I just said, "We need to get going, okay? I'll explain later." I kept looking over my shoulder while we moved through the crowd toward the exit. The man stayed about 20 feet behind, weaving through people, never taking his eyes off us. We pushed through the doors and out into the bright sun of the parking lot. The heat bounced off the asphalt, making the air shimmer, but all I could focus on was getting to our car. The lot was crowded, horns beeping, carts rolling past. I unlocked the doors with the key fob and told the kids to get in fast. That's when I saw the man change direction and start walking straight toward us, moving quicker now, no phone, just eyes locked on me. I glanced around. No security in sight, nobody nearby who looked like they'd help. I put myself between the kids and the man, just like I'd practiced at work. I kept my voice calm but steady, told Ethan to get in and lock the doors behind him. Emma was whining, scared now because she could tell something was wrong, but I pushed her into the back seat and pulled the door shut. The man slowed down a few steps from us, close enough that I could see a small scar on his cheek, his expression tense. I made it clear I wasn't backing down, shoulders squared, ready to do whatever it took. He stopped and looked at me, realizing I was ready to fight if he tried anything. For a moment, he hesitated. Then his eyes flicked to something behind me. He made a quick hand signal, 2 fingers, pointed low. That's when a dark Grand Cherokee with tinted windows swung around the corner and rolled up next to us. The engine barely made a sound, but it felt loud in that moment. The man didn't say a word. He darted to the passenger door, climbed in, and the vehicle sped off, tires squealing, leaving us with a cloud of exhaust and a trail of nerves. My hands were shaking as I got into the driver's seat, but I forced myself to sound normal for the kids' sake, telling them to keep their seatbelts on and that everything was okay. Once the doors were locked and the car was moving, I called the police from the parking lot, describing the man, the Jeep, and the whole situation in as much detail as I could remember. An officer met us at the Riverside station later that afternoon. He asked questions, taking notes while the kids sat next to me on a hard bench. The detective told me there was already an active investigation into an organized group targeting families at shopping centers. He said they used one person to follow and monitor potential victims, while others waited in vehicles nearby, ready to act if the moment was right. The description of the Jeep matched other reports from different malls in the area. The detective said that because I noticed what was happening and didn't freeze up, and because I was obviously willing to defend myself and my family, we probably avoided a much worse situation. He reminded me to always trust my instincts in public spaces, no matter how paranoid it seemed. After that day, I changed the way we did simple things like shopping or even walking to the car. I don't go to crowded malls alone with the kids anymore, always bringing another adult. I taught Ethan and Emma what to look for: people following too close, cars lingering in parking lots, strangers who seemed too interested in us. I even started talking to my friends and neighbors about it, because most people have no idea how quickly something normal can turn dangerous. Now, every time we go out, I scan every face, every vehicle, every corner of the lot. Sometimes I catch myself feeling jumpy, thinking maybe I'm overreacting. But then I remember how close we came that afternoon. Being paranoid isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and something you never want to experience. I still shop with my kids, but I never stop watching, and I never let my guard down. That's just how it is now. I was working the graveyard shift as a patrol sergeant when this happened last Thursday. Around 1:30 a.m., I was driving through the industrial district on the outskirts of town. The place always made me uneasy, even though nothing ever really happened out there. Most of the factories had been closed for years, leaving empty lots and abandoned buildings. Windows were boarded up with old, splintered plywood. Weeds grew up through cracks in the pavement, and chain-link fences were bent out of shape, sagging into the dirt. The roads back there had potholes that would swallow a tire if you weren't careful. My headlights bounced over them as I went slow, mostly to keep my car from getting rattled to pieces. Usually there was nothing to see except for a stray cat, or maybe a couple of truckers parked out by the old storage units, catching sleep between runs. But that night, something caught my eye right away. I noticed 7 or 8 cars parked behind an old textile factory with no lights on. The whole lot behind that building was full of trash and broken pallets, but the cars looked clean, all lined up close together. There was a layer of dust on everything, but you could see their tires had rolled through it recently. The moonlight made their silhouettes visible against the empty lot, and I could see that the vehicles weren't junkers. They were newer sedans, a couple of SUVs, nothing fancy, but not the kind you'd expect to find abandoned back there. I slowed the patrol car to a crawl, letting it idle with the headlights dimmed. Something about the scene felt wrong immediately. There were people moving between the vehicles carrying boxes and bags. Nobody was laughing or talking loud, just a low murmur, heads down, all business. It struck me as odd because, at that hour, anyone with a reason to be in the industrial district would be long gone. Most of the time, the only movement was wind blowing garbage across the parking lots. But these people were working fast, keeping close to the cars, loading up the trunks and back seats. The textile factory itself was a huge 2-story building, most of the windows either broken out or completely dark. No lights inside or outside, just the faint reflection of the moon on the glass. I kept watching, staying half hidden behind a row of dumpsters across the street. The group was too big to be a couple of bored kids or taggers looking for a spot to hang out. The way they moved reminded me of the last time we had a big burglary ring running jobs on the south side. Only they were quieter, more careful. Every couple of seconds, someone would stop and scan the street, eyes darting around. Once, one of the men even crouched down behind the hood of a car, peering in my direction, but I hadn't been noticed yet. I turned off the patrol car's interior light and radio, just in case. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of oil and something sweet, like cheap perfume or maybe one of those air fresheners people hang from rearview mirrors. The group kept moving with quick, short steps, heads ducked. From where I sat, I could make out at least 2 women in the group, both wearing dark hooded sweatshirts, hair tied back, faces hidden. They stayed close together, talking in low voices, and carried lighter bags, maybe purses, or something smaller. The men did most of the heavy lifting, pulling out boxes from the trunk of one car and handing them off to the others, moving like they'd done this before. One man in particular, tall and heavyset, seemed to be in charge. He pointed at the cars and the bags, directing traffic with sharp hand signals, never raising his voice. I waited for a few more minutes, watching as they finished with the first round of boxes and began rearranging things in the trunks. A couple of them ducked into the factory's side door, which was hanging open on busted hinges. Inside was just darkness, no sign of a flashlight or even a glow from a phone. When they came back out, they were empty-handed, glancing nervously over their shoulders. The way they kept looking around made the hair on my neck stand up. There wasn't any reason for that kind of nervous energy unless you knew you were doing something you shouldn't. I parked at a distance and observed through my binoculars. The group was acting secretive, whispering and constantly looking around. Even through the binoculars, I could see the tension in their faces, the way their hands shook just a little as they loaded bags. They moved with purpose but kept checking over their shoulders. It wasn't the sort of behavior you'd expect from someone just picking up forgotten belongings or helping a friend move. One guy, younger, with close-cropped hair and a white stripe down the side of his pants, kept glancing at his phone, then at the road. He looked jumpy, tapping his foot, chewing on his thumb when he thought nobody was watching. They kept packing up the cars, and the tension grew with every minute that passed. Someone dropped a box, and everyone froze for a second. The box hit the pavement with a dull thud, but no one shouted or even said a word. The heavy-set man shot a glare at the guy who'd dropped it, then helped him pick it up, quick and quiet. The whole scene looked like a well-oiled machine starting to fall apart under pressure. 2 of the men began arguing in low voices, waving their hands, but the tall man shut them down fast, stepping in between them and hissing something I couldn't make out. He pointed at the cars and gestured for everyone to hurry up. The longer I watched, the more obvious it became that this wasn't some innocent meetup or abandoned property retrieval. These people knew exactly what they were doing, and they were doing it in a hurry. I reached for the radio to call it in, but hesitated. not wanting to spook the group before I could figure out what exactly was going on. That's when one man, thin with a close-cut beard, suddenly stiffened. He turned and stared directly toward my patrol car, eyes locked on the silhouette in the shadows. He squinted, lifted a hand to his brow, then quickly signaled to the others. A ripple of movement went through the group. I saw them stop what they were doing, talking quickly, heads close together. I could see them getting agitated and starting to pack up quickly. The whole operation switched gears in a second. Trunks slammed shut, car doors opened, and boxes were stuffed wherever there was room. Their body language screamed guilt. The men kept glancing toward me, some ducking behind cars, others moving fast toward the factory's side door. They were abandoning whatever wasn't packed already, clearly more worried about getting caught than finishing the job. I knew I had stumbled onto something illegal. The whole operation had the feel of people who knew they shouldn't be there. I lowered the binoculars and watched as one of the cars started up, headlights flicking on for a split second before the driver switched them off again. I could see them, tense and alert, about to make their next move. Suddenly, someone screamed from the group. It cut through the quiet like glass shattering. I couldn't see who it was at first, just a loud yell and the sound of something hitting the ground. From the way the rest of the group reacted, it sounded like someone got hurt while loading something heavy. In the next moment, I made my decision. I hit my sirens and headlights, flooding the empty lot with blue and white flashes. The noise echoed off the factory walls. I drove toward the lot immediately, tires crunching over broken glass and loose gravel. By the time I reached the area, most of the cars were already speeding away in different directions. Engines roared to life, headlights cut across the darkness, and taillights bobbed as they swerved around potholes and out into the street. Doors slammed. A couple of the men shouted at each other to hurry up, voices tight with panic. The group scattered with practiced speed, not bothering to finish loading everything. Only one vehicle was slow to move, an old van parked at the far end of the lot. I could see someone in the driver's seat struggling to start the engine, turning the key again and again while looking over his shoulder. The other cars were already disappearing down side streets, their brake lights flickering out of sight. I managed to get the license plate of only one vehicle, the old van with what looked like fake plates. It finally sputtered to life and lurched forward, the back door hanging open for a second before someone slammed it shut from inside. The van peeled out, tires spinning, and took off last, fishtailing as it shot out of the lot. I watched it bounce over a curb and race away into the night. I radioed for backup right away, voice steady, giving the plate number and direction. But I knew they were already long gone. The district had too many back roads, alleys, and empty lots to disappear into. The lot was empty except for tire tracks and cigarette butts scattered on the ground. It went silent fast, only my engine humming and the wind rattling through broken fence wire. There were marks in the dirt from where the cars had spun out, and a couple of deep footprints near a crushed cardboard box. I got out, sweeping my flashlight over the area, half expecting someone to still be hiding behind the dumpsters. But there was no one left. The smell of burnt rubber lingered, along with that strange, sweet odor from before. I ran the plate number as soon as I got back to the car. The system pinged within seconds. The van had been reported stolen a month ago from a parking lot on the west side. The owner's name meant nothing to me, just another victim in a long line. I gave the details to dispatch and drove a slow loop around the block, looking for any sign the group might have doubled back. But there was nothing except empty streets and a couple of flickering streetlights. I stayed in the area for another hour, watching, waiting, hoping someone might make a mistake and come back for something they'd left behind. The next day, detectives picked up the case. By the time my shift ended, word came down that they'd found a warehouse full of stolen goods in the neighboring district. It wasn't much to look at. A windowless building tucked between two old machine shops. But inside, there were pallets stacked high with electronics, appliances, and boxed-up merchandise. The haul was bigger than we expected. The investigation moved fast after that. Patrols picked up 2 men matching descriptions from the night before, and forensics pulled prints from the van. Within a week, there were arrests. 3 members of the theft ring were caught and confessed under questioning. They talked about how the operation worked, how they'd target empty lots, how the goods were taken from stores and delivered to the warehouse at night. They had inside help, someone working at a shipping company who made sure shipments disappeared off the books. The group had been reselling stolen electronics and appliances for months. The detectives found records of online sales, burner phones, and cash drops. The injured person from that night turned out to be one of the men who confessed. He had dropped a stolen TV trying to load it into the van and hurt his back. He ended up in the ER a few hours after the botched job, using a fake name, but they traced him back through security footage and hospital records. The man admitted he panicked when he saw the patrol car and had almost left the others behind. What bothered me most was how organized they were. This wasn't some amateur operation or a couple of bored kids looking to make a quick buck. This was a well-coordinated criminal enterprise with real planning. They had lookouts watching the roads, escape routes mapped out in advance, and a distribution network already in place. The warehouse was just one of several spots detectives found listed in coded messages. The stolen goods warehouse contained thousands of dollars worth of merchandise from local stores, TVs, laptops, gaming consoles, even kitchen appliances, all boxed and ready for resale. If I hadn't decided to check that lot, they might have operated for months longer, slipping under the radar while the police worked other cases. Sometimes it's just luck. Being in the right place at the right time, noticing something that doesn't fit. But even now, when I think about that night, I remember how close they came to slipping away for good. The people behind it weren't the kind of criminals you'd spot on the street. They blended in during the day, working regular jobs, living in regular houses. Sometimes the most dangerous criminals are the ones who blend into normal society during the day. You never know what people are capable of when they think no one is watching. It was a habit for us, me and Barbara, to just get in the car and drive on Sundays. Utah has these mountain roads that look unreal at sunset, so we just fill a thermos, maybe pack a couple sandwiches, and take off with no real plan. On that night, I remember Barbara mentioning how empty the roads felt, even for a Sunday. It was early October, about 9 at night, so already dark, and the sky was clear. We had just come out of a long stretch of canyon, rock walls pushing up on both sides. Not many turnoffs, no other cars. Radio was playing static in the background because you don't get reception out there. We were a few miles from the national park entrance, just this thin 2-lane blacktop winding between cliffs. That's when I saw the hazards up ahead. Orange lights blinking, reflected on the rock. The car was a dark Jeep, parked halfway on the shoulder, nose angled to the side. The guy was already outside, pacing a bit, but he stopped and waved both arms as we slowed up. He was maybe mid-20s, fit, dressed in running shoes and a lightweight jacket, no hat. I rolled down my window a couple inches when we pulled up next to him. I kept the engine running. Habit, I guess. He leaned down so I could see his face in the headlights. Clean-shaven, wide eyes, friendly enough, but a little too eager. "Hey, sorry, can you help? My Jeep's stuck, battery's dead and my phone's out." He jerked a thumb toward the car. "There's no reception here, and I've been trying to flag someone down for a while." His breath smoked in the cold air. He kept smiling, like he wanted to show he wasn't dangerous. But there was this way he stood, never taking a step back from the car, just right up in my window. I asked what happened. He said he'd pulled off to look at the view, and his Jeep slid a bit on the shoulder, maybe soft ground, and then wouldn't start. I looked past him. The Jeep didn't look off balance. All 4 tires were solid on the gravel, no mud, no ruts, just parked crooked. Barbara was already watching him close. He kept talking, saying it'd help a lot if we could get out and help him push. "It's probably just stuck," he said. "If you could both just give me a hand with it." There was this hint of impatience, like he'd rehearsed it. His eyes flicked from me to Barbara, then back to me, like he was sizing up if we were going to get out. I told him we could call for help. My phone had service half a mile back, and maybe if we drove a little farther, we could call a tow truck for him. He pressed again, more urgent this time, said the nearest help was hours away, and it'd just take a second. He just needed us to push. He kept trying to make it sound simple, like we were already out of the car. The whole time he never looked at his Jeep, just at us. Barbara leaned over and told me quietly that she didn't think the car was stuck. She was staring at the wheels, then the road around it. "It's not in a ditch," she whispered. I nodded but didn't say anything. The guy noticed, his face twitching just a bit before he tried to smile again. He glanced over his shoulder at the Jeep. The hazard lights kept blinking, lighting up the empty canyon walls. I started feeling like we were out there too long, that this wasn't just someone needing a jump or a hand pushing. He started shifting his weight, bouncing on his toes a bit, and his voice changed, lower, less patient. "Look, I really need some help here. Can you get out and give me a hand, please?" He was almost blocking the driver's door now, his hands out, half pleading, half blocking the window. I could see sweat under his hairline even though it was cold. His story kept getting more rushed. He said, "Please, both of you. I can't do this alone. I just need you to push a little." Barbara's hand was tight on my arm. She whispered, "We should just go. Now." I nodded, but tried once more. "Listen, we'll call someone for you. Just let us get up the road a bit. There's a pull-off and we can call from there." But he didn't like that. His eyes got sharp, his voice tense. I said I need help now. Don't just drive off. Come on, man. His tone was no longer friendly. He moved closer, practically leaning into the car. That's when Barbara looked past him into the Jeep. She went completely still. I followed her gaze. At first, nothing. Just the dark interior with those cheap seat covers and bags thrown in the back. Then a slight movement. Quick. Almost nothing. Someone was hunched down on the passenger side, ducked below the window. They were trying to stay out of sight, but the hazard lights caught a bit of fabric moving. A knee, maybe a shoulder. Barbara's voice was barely above a whisper. "There's someone in the Jeep." My mouth went dry. I looked back at the guy in front of us, and I saw him watching Barbara, saw the moment he realized she'd seen it. He straightened up, his whole attitude changing, like he was ready for something else. The air felt different, like the canyon walls were pressing in tighter. That's when I stopped talking. I shifted my hand toward the gear stick, watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. I kept my hand steady on the gear shift, watching the man out of the corner of my eye. He noticed and lunged forward, one arm reaching toward the door handle. That's when I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas, tires skidding a little on the gravel shoulder before gripping. He shouted something. Words were lost in the rush of blood in my ears, and chased after the car, slamming a fist on the trunk as we sped backwards down the empty canyon road. Barbara twisted in her seat, looking back, and I saw her pale face in the glow of the dashboard. I slammed the brakes, threw it into drive, and floored it, headlights slicing through the darkness ahead as we took off. In the mirror, I could see him running for a few seconds, then stopping, standing in the glare of our taillights. Barbara was shaking, holding her phone with both hands, but there was still no signal. We didn't talk. We just focused on the road, counting every turn, every mile marker. About 2 miles down, Barbara glanced back again. Her voice was flat. "They're following us." She leaned to get a better view. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the Jeep. No headlights, just the outline of the grille catching a little starlight as it swung onto the road behind us, barely visible. I pushed the accelerator hard, the engine whining as we sped through the curves. The road snaked between rock faces and sharp drop-offs. No shoulder, no lights except what our own car made. I took the corners as fast as I dared, trying not to lose traction. The Jeep kept coming, staying back, trying not to be obvious, but Barbara called out every time she caught a glimpse in the mirror. We hit a longer straightaway, then a set of tight switchbacks that I knew well. I pushed harder, using every bit of the road. Finally, a long bend, a rise, and then nothing behind us. No shape, no lights, just black. We kept going for another 10 minutes, barely breathing, until we saw the glow of distant lights from the edge of the next town. Only then did we let ourselves slow down, the silence in the car heavier than ever. When the sun finally came up, neither of us had slept. We drove straight to the nearest police station and waited for someone to take our report. The officer listened as we told him everything. Where we'd been, what the man looked like, the fake breakdown, the hidden person in the Jeep, the chase. He wrote it all down, face tight. When we finished, he nodded and said quietly, "You did the right thing getting out of there. There's been a gang working this canyon for weeks. Same story every time. Jeep or pickup with the hazards on. Young guy flagging down cars, another one hiding inside. They wait until someone gets out, then more come out of hiding. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3. Tourists mostly, out-of-state plates, late at night when it's quiet." He told us a few people hadn't been as lucky. One group had been robbed at gunpoint and left tied up by the side of the road. Another couple had tried to fight back and were beaten. The officer flipped through some files and read off other reports, same location, same method. The gang was careful, moving up and down the highway, picking their spots. He said we'd done exactly what he always told people: don't get out, don't stop, and don't trust anyone who tries to get you out of your vehicle in the middle of nowhere. You two got away clean. Some haven't. After our report, the police asked us for every detail. Descriptions, what we'd seen, anything about the Jeep or the man's face. Barbara remembered the license plate, at least most of it. The officer said that helped. That afternoon, we got a call. 2 more drivers had come in, reporting almost the exact same thing, just hours apart. Police were putting extra patrols in the canyon and passing out warnings to anyone headed that way. They told us to stay local for a couple days in case they needed more information. A week later, an officer called again. They'd caught them. Patrol cars spotted the Jeep parked just off a turnout, hazard lights blinking. This time, the police didn't stop. They drove by and circled back without lights, caught the gang in the act. 4 men in total, 2 of them hiding inside the Jeep, one standing on the shoulder, another down in the bushes near the road. They matched the descriptions given by us and other victims. The cops found stolen wallets, jewelry, even a few passports in the trunk of the Jeep. The whole thing fell apart quick. They'd robbed at least a dozen drivers the same way. Late at night, remote spots, always the same fake breakdown. One elderly couple had been badly hurt and hospitalized, left in the cold overnight after being tied up. Another group had walked nearly 6 miles in the dark before finding help. We were called to testify at the trial a few months later. The gang was all there, trying to look harmless in their court clothes, but Barbara and I both recognized them. We answered every question. What we saw, what was said, how the Jeep chased us down the canyon. Other victims did the same. The judge didn't hesitate. All 4 were convicted and given long sentences, no chance of parole for years. They weren't new to this. They'd been working highways in different states, always looking for easy marks. Sometimes I still think about that night, about what could have happened if we'd stepped out of the car or tried to help. It's strange how fast something normal can turn. How you can go from watching the stars in a canyon to running for your life in seconds. I trust my instincts more now, and I listen to Barbara when she gets that uneasy feeling. If you ever feel like something is wrong, even if you can't say why, just trust it. It might save your life. I was 19 and stupid when this happened during my sophomore year in Austin. I didn't have a lot of friends yet, so I mostly stuck with the same crowd from my freshman dorm. That Friday, my buddy Kyle texted me saying he was throwing a party at his house off Riverside. I didn't have anything better to do, so I drove over around 9. I remember pulling up on that street, all the cars parked in the grass and trash cans tipped over, red cups everywhere. Kyle was already a few drinks in, yelling at me through the screen door to hurry up. Before I even got out of my car, he popped his head out and told me to leave my phone in the glove compartment. He said, "People jack phones all the time here. Just trust me, man." I thought it was weird, but I'd been to enough sketchy parties to know he wasn't totally wrong. I locked my phone in the car, tucked my keys into my sock, and went inside. The place was packed. People everywhere, smoke drifting out the back door, music shaking the windows. I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and hung out by the fridge, keeping an eye on the other guests. I didn't know half the people there, but Kyle kept dragging me over to meet his new friends from work, people I could barely remember. After an hour or so, I was already a little drunk. I kept losing track of my drink, grabbing random cans off the counter. At some point, someone handed me a shot. I took it without thinking, barely tasted it, and then things started to blur. The music was loud enough to feel in my chest, bass thumping through the floor. But after a while, it just blended into background noise. I remember bumping into the same guy twice in the hallway, apologizing both times. Every time I looked for Kyle, he was talking to a new group, already slurring his words. By midnight, most of the people I'd come with had disappeared or gone outside to smoke. The crowd thinned out a little. I wandered into the backyard, feeling the cold October air hit my skin and wishing I'd brought a jacket. The fire pit was going, but nobody was really sitting around it. Just a couple of guys laughing about something on a phone. I asked around for Kyle, but nobody had seen him. I checked the kitchen again and found it almost empty except for one couple making out against the counter. My head was buzzing. I knew I needed to slow down, maybe eat something, but the only food left was a bowl of stale pretzels. I went back outside, thinking maybe Kyle was by his car, but when I got to the curb, his spot was empty. Just a stain on the concrete where he'd been parked. I tried not to panic, but I realized I hadn't seen him for at least an hour. I didn't know most of the people left at the party and the mood had shifted. Everyone was quieter, more drunk, groups breaking up and talking in low voices. It was almost 2 a.m. I stood by the street, feeling the cold start to sink through my clothes, and finally accepted that Kyle wasn't coming back for a while. I checked my pockets for my phone before remembering it was still in the car. I looked up and down the block. Nothing but empty driveways, a stray dog running past a trash can. It felt like the whole neighborhood had fallen asleep except for this one last party, lights flickering behind dirty curtains. My house was 5 miles away, too far to walk comfortably, especially with how drunk I was. The street was quiet, no traffic at all, and the air was sharp, cutting through the last of my buzz. I thought about just waiting in my car for a few hours until morning. but I didn't want to risk someone messing with me while I slept. The only option I could think of was to hitch a ride or walk until I could find a cab. But at that hour, nothing was open. I stood there for a few minutes, rubbing my hands together, and finally made up my mind. I walked down the block, away from the house, toward Highway 183, figuring I'd have a better chance catching a ride somewhere with more cars. The grass along the shoulder was stiff with frost, and my shoes were already soaked through. It felt like every sound was louder than it should be. My footsteps, the wind, the distant hum of traffic I couldn't see yet. When I reached the highway, the streetlights threw long shadows across the pavement. It was colder out there, wide open, with only the occasional car whizzing by. I stuck my thumb out a couple times, but the first few cars didn't even slow down. I kept moving, shuffling along the gravel, breathing out clouds into the air. My legs felt heavy. 10 minutes went by, maybe more. I was starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake, if I should have just walked the whole way home. Just when I was about to give up, a pair of headlights slowed in the distance. I stood back a little just in case, but the truck pulled over to the shoulder, brakes squeaking in the cold. It was a red Chevrolet pickup, a little beat up, the kind of truck that looked like it spent more time on job sites than city streets. The driver rolled down the window, leaned across the seat. He was older, maybe late 40s, gray beard, heavy-set, a baseball cap pulled low. "You need a ride?" he asked, voice scratchy but not unfriendly. I told him where I lived, and he nodded. "I'm heading that way. Hop in. Name's Ray Thompson." I hesitated for a second, but I was freezing, my head still foggy from the drinks. I climbed into the passenger seat, shut the door, and tried not to look too relieved. The inside of the truck smelled like cigarettes and old coffee. There was a stack of papers on the dash, empty soda cans in the footwell. I buckled up as he pulled back onto the road. Thompson glanced over, one hand on the wheel. "You go to UT?" he asked. I said yeah, explained about the party, how my friend had ditched me. He just chuckled. "College kids," he said. "I remember those days." He kept up the small talk as we drove, asked what I was studying, where I was from, if my parents lived nearby. His questions felt casual, just enough to keep me from worrying too much. The heater was blasting, and I started to thaw out a little, but the warmth made me even more tired. I slumped against the window, trying to keep my eyes open. The lights from passing cars blurred together. Ray talked about the traffic on the highway, about the construction near the airport, about his own son who used to go to UT. I tried to listen, but the hum of the engine and the leftover alcohol in my blood made it hard to focus. My eyelids were heavy. I kept telling myself to stay awake, to watch the road, but every time I blinked, it felt harder to open my eyes again. We were only a few minutes down the highway when I realized how little I'd paid attention to where we were actually going. I stared out the window, trying to spot familiar landmarks, but everything looked the same in the dark. The houses were spread farther apart out here, long driveways disappearing into the shadows. Ray kept talking, something about football, but his voice was just a background noise. I nodded along, barely hearing him, letting myself drift. My mind wandered in and out, the cold finally fading from my bones, and I leaned my head against the glass, just grateful for the ride, not caring about anything else right then. At some point I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is the truck jerking hard to the left, pulling me out of that half-sleep. I blinked, confused, and looked out the window, expecting to see the familiar signs for my neighborhood. Instead, the streetlights had disappeared, and the houses were gone. It was just the dark outline of trees and empty road ahead. I turned to Thompson, trying to hide the edge in my voice, and told him, "Hey, my turn was back there on Oakview." He kept his eyes on the road and said, "Yeah, I know, but there's a shortcut up here. I'll get you home faster." His tone was different now. Short, almost annoyed, like he didn't want me talking. The road was empty. Not a single car passed us in either direction. We kept going, every minute taking us farther from the city lights. I tried to stay calm, watching the turns, making a mental note of every sign and mile marker we passed, but nothing looked familiar. Thompson's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. He glanced over, and I caught a quick look in his eyes. Not friendly anymore, more like he was sizing me up. I started to feel the cold again, this time from inside, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then he started talking, but it wasn't small talk anymore. He asked me if I had a girlfriend, if I was into older women, if my parents would be waiting up for me. I gave short answers, trying to keep things neutral, hoping I could just get him to turn around. But he just kept pushing, the questions getting more personal. Suddenly his hand reached across the seat, resting on my leg. I flinched, pulling away, but he pressed harder. "Relax, man," he said. "We're just having a little fun." I told him to stop, louder this time, but he just laughed. His fingers dug in tighter, and I realized I wasn't just drunk and lost. I was trapped in this guy's truck, miles from anyone, in the middle of the night. I pulled my leg away and pressed myself against the door, looking for the handle, but the locks were down. I tried again to convince him, saying, "Look, my dad's a cop. He's probably waiting for me." Thompson ignored me, muttering something about kids these days thinking they're so smart. I started to panic, glancing out the window, desperate for any sign of another car or a lit house, but it was just pitch-black fields on either side. Thompson kept driving, speeding up, heading further away from anything I recognized. I forced myself to stay quiet and watch, waiting for any chance to escape, my hands pressed tight against the door as his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. We must have been 5 or 6 miles past my neighborhood when, out of nowhere, red and blue lights flashed behind us. A sheriff's patrol car appeared, siren cutting through the night. Thompson swore under his breath and slowed down, looking in the mirror. I felt a rush of relief so strong it made me dizzy. The sheriff's car pulled up close, lights reflecting off the wet road. Thompson muttered, "Don't say a word." But I ignored him, heart pounding, watching as the officer stepped out and approached the truck. The cop tapped on Thompson's window, motioning for him to roll it down. "Evening. License and registration." Thompson handed them over, trying to sound casual, but his hands were shaking. The officer asked, "Where you headed tonight?" Thompson answered quickly, stumbling over his words, making up a story about driving his nephew home from a party. I blurted out, "I don't know this guy. He picked me up hitchhiking, but he missed my street." The officer's eyes narrowed, looking from me to Thompson. "That true?" I nodded. Thompson started arguing, but the cop cut him off, asking me to step out of the truck. I didn't hesitate. As soon as the door opened, I jumped out, backing away from the pickup, still shaking. The officer came around and stood between us, asking me what happened. I kept it simple, told him about the party, the ride, Thompson missing my street, and what he'd tried to do. The officer sniffed, probably smelling the alcohol on my breath, but he kept his focus on Thompson. He asked him again where he was taking me, but Thompson's answers didn't match what he'd said before. The cop radioed for backup, telling me to wait by the patrol car. While we waited, the officer kept a hand on his holster, never taking his eyes off Thompson. Another unit pulled up a few minutes later, and 2 more deputies stepped out, one of them cuffing Thompson while the other searched the truck. Thompson was still shouting, saying I was lying, that he'd just been giving me a ride home, but his voice was shaking now. The officers ignored him, talking quietly among themselves. After they finished searching the truck, the first deputy walked over to me and said, "You did the right thing, kid. I'll drive you home." The ride back was quiet. The deputy asked me for my address, made sure I had my keys, and told me to lock my doors and get some rest. I could see the flashing lights fading in the distance as we pulled away. Thompson still standing by the side of the road, handcuffed, head down. When we reached my street, the cop walked me to my door, waited until I was inside, and told me to call if I ever needed help again. I went straight to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, still shivering, the whole thing playing over and over in my head. A few days later, Kyle called to apologize for leaving me at the party. He said his phone had died and he didn't know I'd tried to leave. I told him what happened, and he just kept saying he was sorry. I couldn't really blame him, but I stopped going to those parties for a while. A couple weeks after that, my mom showed me a news article about a red pickup truck found near the same highway. The driver, Ray Thompson, had been arrested for assault and attempted kidnapping. He'd also been connected to a recent gas station robbery that happened just hours before he picked me up. Turns out Thompson had a long record. Assaults, attempted kidnappings, mostly targeting drunk college students on weekends. The police thought he'd been driving that stretch of road for months, looking for easy targets. If the patrol car hadn't pulled us over that night, there's no telling what might have happened to me. That thought stuck with me. I never hitchhiked again, never left my phone in the car, and never trusted a stranger's shortcut. Sometimes I still think about that night, about how close I came to disappearing without a trace. It only takes one bad decision for your whole life to change. And there's always someone out there looking for a victim who won't fight back. That night, I learned what it means to be truly vulnerable, and how fast an ordinary night can turn into a nightmare. I was 30 and working as a programmer when this happened last summer. Every weekday after work, I had a simple routine. Change out of work clothes, stretch, and go running along the River Oaks Trail for 3 miles. The trail ran parallel to the Chattahoochee River. It's paved but not busy, and thick bushes and wild grass separate it from the backyards of the neighborhoods. Some places, the bushes are so overgrown you can't see the houses at all. On clear days, the sun would drop right over the trees and turn the water gold. That Tuesday, it was just as normal. I parked at the small public lot, left my wallet locked in the glove box, and started the run a little after 6 p.m. I'd done this loop so many times I didn't even listen to music anymore. I just watched the water, dodged the occasional stick, and kept pace. I'd maybe passed 5 or 6 people the whole way out. Some dog walkers, a teenage couple, a guy on a bike with a delivery backpack. The rest of the trail was empty. Around the 2nd mile, near where a fallen tree forced people to step off the pavement for a few feet, I saw a woman standing next to the bushes. She was brunette, probably mid-30s, athletic clothes and bright blue running shoes. She had that look people get when they've lost something, a mix of annoyed and stressed. She waved at me, so I slowed down. She said, "Hey, sorry, do you have your phone? I locked my keys in my car. I need to call my husband." I didn't think much of it. Her car keys were dangling from a neon lanyard in her hand, and I figured maybe she meant she'd lost the house keys. She was kind of anxious, glancing back toward the lot. I fished my phone from my armband and handed it over, told her to go ahead and call. She thanked me, started tapping in a number, and stepped a little closer to the edge of the bushes. I stood nearby, catching my breath, looking out at the water. The whole thing felt normal, like helping a stranger on a run. I saw her unlock the screen, tap numbers, but then pause and look over her shoulder. There were barely any sounds on the trail, just bugs and the distant noise of a lawnmower. For some reason, I started to notice the quiet more. She stood with her back to me, one hand on the phone, one on her hip, watching the bushes like she was expecting someone. The seconds dragged out longer than seemed normal for just dialing a number. I glanced back toward the lot, expecting to maybe see a car pull up, but nothing. The small lot was empty except for my car and an old blue SUV. After another few moments, she kept looking into the bushes, not at the phone, and I started feeling uncomfortable. I shifted my weight from foot to foot, half wondering if I should just ask for my phone back and get on with my run. Instead, I just waited, keeping a few feet between us, watching as she finally pressed the phone to her ear. I heard her say, "Hey, yeah, I've got someone's phone." It was quiet, almost a whisper, and I didn't hear anything else after that. Then, right at that moment, a man walked out of the bushes next to her. He was medium height, maybe late 30s or early 40s, wearing faded jeans and a dark jacket, even though it was hot. I hadn't seen or heard him at all before he stepped out. He stood right next to the woman, only a few feet away from me, hands in his pockets, not saying a word. The woman didn't look surprised to see him. She just turned a little and handed him my phone. Neither of them introduced themselves or explained anything. The man didn't look at me at all. He kept his eyes on the woman, then glanced at my phone's screen. Something in the air changed. It was like time slowed down. She hadn't mentioned anyone with her, hadn't called out for help. Nothing. The way she looked at the man, and the way he ignored me, made it clear they weren't strangers. They stood shoulder to shoulder, not talking, just looking at the phone together. My stomach tightened. I remembered she'd said she was alone, but now she acted like this guy was exactly who she'd been waiting for. I started thinking about my wallet in the car, how isolated this spot was, how I'd barely seen anyone else for 15 minutes. I reached out, keeping my voice as steady as I could, and said, "Actually, can I get my phone back?" The man hesitated, watching the woman, but then she shrugged and handed it to me, screen still open to the call log. I checked the screen as I took it, not really knowing why. There was no call in progress, just my home screen. I stepped back quickly, putting distance between me and both of them. I told them I was late for something and turned to go, forcing a weak smile and trying not to show how tense I was. My heart was beating faster than from the run, but I kept my steps steady until I rounded the bend. Once I was out of their sight, I broke into a full sprint, not caring about my usual pace anymore. I could feel my back prickling as if they might come after me at any second. I didn't even look back until I hit the next cross path. When I finally glanced over my shoulder, I saw them together far behind me, walking calmly, but they were going the opposite direction from where the parking lot was. That set off alarms in my head. If she really lost her keys, why would they be heading away from the cars? There was no reason unless she had lied. I moved as fast as I could the rest of the way. When I reached the end of the trail, I scanned the lot. No sign of them. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my car, got in, and locked the doors. I didn't even bother stretching or cooling down. My mind kept replaying the whole thing. Her fake story, the silent man, their weird body language. Everything about it felt wrong, and my instincts were screaming that I had just dodged something dangerous. The next morning, I woke up still uneasy. I almost convinced myself it was just paranoia, that maybe I'd overreacted and nothing was really going on. But then, during breakfast, I checked the local news site out of habit. There was a headline about an assault and robbery on the River Oaks Trail. A runner had been attacked the evening before. Same time, same place. My hands started sweating as I read the details. Police were looking for a male-female team preying on people along the trail. The article said the woman would ask for help, lost keys, phone call, whatever. While the runner was distracted, her partner would come out of hiding and ambush them from behind. The attackers robbed at least 3 victims over the past month. It was exactly what I'd experienced, except I got away. My skin crawled as I pictured the man's blank stare and the woman's fake distress. Without thinking, I called the police hotline listed in the article. I explained everything: when, where, what they looked like, what they said, even what they were wearing. The officer on the phone thanked me and said my statement could help with the investigation. Later that day, they called me back and asked for more details. I described the man and woman as best I could and answered every question, from her shoes to the kind of phone she used. A week later, they told me my information was useful for making composite sketches of both suspects. It felt strange seeing their faces on a news segment, drawn almost exactly how I remembered them. It was about 2 weeks after my close call that the news broke again. The police caught the couple after another robbery attempt went wrong. This time, their target was a younger man, maybe in his early 20s, and he managed to fight back. The attacker ended up with a broken arm and tried to escape, but police were nearby and arrested both of them. The story came out slowly after that. The pair had been working the trails for months, picking times when the paths were quiet and people were isolated. They'd perfected their method, the woman looking helpless, the man lurking just out of sight. Most runners didn't expect trouble from someone who seemed to need help, especially a woman. The distraction was always the same. "I lost my keys. Can I use your phone?" The second the victim was off guard, the man would strike. They got wallets, phones, sometimes car keys. When the cops searched their apartment, they found a pile of stolen property and even a notebook with notes about times and places to find lone runners. Police said my description and those from other survivors helped build the case that finally put them away. After the arrest, I drove past the River Oaks Trail a few times, thinking maybe I'd try to run there again, but I never stopped. Even seeing the bushes and the empty path made me uneasy. I changed my routine, picked new routes with more people around, and I kept my phone tucked deep in my pocket, not in an armband. Sometimes I catch myself looking at people a little longer than before, wondering if they're really in trouble or just pretending. I guess I'm more cautious now, more suspicious, but I'm alive. I think about that evening a lot. How normal it all seemed at first. How easy it was to get drawn in by someone asking for help. The police told me I was smart to trust my instincts, to get away before anything happened. If I hadn't, if I just waited one more minute or turned my back, I could have ended up like the others, or worse. What I learned is simple. Sometimes being paranoid saves your life. You want to believe the best in people, but you have to listen to that voice in your head when something feels off. It's not weakness, it's survival. If something doesn't seem right, don't ignore it. Change your path, make up an excuse, just get away. I never found out exactly what made me notice the warning signs. Maybe the way she paused before dialing. Maybe how the man just appeared from nowhere. Maybe something about the way they stood together like it was all rehearsed. But I'm grateful I paid attention. The world isn't always safe, even in the middle of an ordinary day, even on a trail you've run 100 times before. Last month, I was driving from Texas to Washington for a new job and needed a place to crash for one night. I found this cheap rental in some tiny town through a popular app. The photos looked basic but clean, nothing special. I didn't care, honestly. I just needed a place to lay down for a few hours, maybe get a shower, and hit the road again. My drive had already been long, and by the time I pulled up to the house, it was a little after 8 p.m. The sun was mostly down. The neighborhood was pretty empty. I parked right out front, grabbed my duffel bag and walked up. The porch light was already on. The door was one of those old wood ones, kind of warped, with a metal screen door rattling against the frame in the wind. When I stepped inside, there was this heavy, musty smell right away. Not just like old house, but damp and kind of sharp, like something between dirty socks and wet cardboard. It wasn't overpowering, but it was definitely there, especially in the hallway. The place was furnished, but everything was old. Brown plaid couch, low coffee table, a little TV with rabbit ears. There was a narrow hallway going off the living room, with 2 closed doors on one side and what looked like a bathroom at the end. I went to check the bedroom first, just to see if I wanted to sleep there or on the couch. As soon as I opened the bedroom door, the smell hit harder. It was almost like the room hadn't been aired out in years. The carpet was this faded blue, kind of stained, and the mattress was just a plain twin with a thin cover. I stood in the doorway for a minute, trying to decide, but just being in there made my eyes sting. I left the door open, went back to the living room, and dropped my bag by the couch. The kitchen was off the living room too. It was tiny, with old wood cabinets and a linoleum floor that peeled up in the corners. The fridge hummed loud but seemed to be working. I poured myself a glass of water, checked the locks on the doors and windows, and set my phone to charge. I didn't see any cameras or weird notes from the owner, which was good. I unrolled my sleeping bag on the couch, laid out my pillow, and turned on the TV to see if there was any signal. Static, then a low, fuzzy channel in Spanish. Whatever. I left it for the background noise. I was tired, but my brain was still buzzing from the drive. I pulled out my phone, checked my route for tomorrow, and tried to relax. That's when I heard a loud thump. It was deep in the house, not right next to me, but not outside either. It sounded heavy, like someone had dropped a box or maybe slammed a cabinet. I paused, muted the TV, and listened. Nothing else. I waited for a minute, thinking it might just be the house settling or maybe the wind slamming a loose shutter. I listened harder, but the place was dead silent again. I decided it wasn't worth worrying about. I was too tired for paranoia. Still, I looked around the room again, just in case. After a couple minutes, I figured I should at least check it out. I grabbed my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and went into the hallway. The first door was the bathroom, small and kind of claustrophobic. The light flickered but stayed on. The second door was a closet, almost empty except for a broom, a dustpan, and some old hangers. The third door was locked, which was weird, but I figured it was just a supply closet or the owner's stuff. I rattled the knob, nothing. I scanned the floor for signs of animals, but didn't see anything. I walked through the kitchen again, checking under the table and behind the fridge. Nothing. The back door was locked tight, deadbolt and chain. I even checked the little laundry room by the kitchen, but it was just a washer and dryer, some empty detergent bottles. I felt stupid for even looking, but the sound had been real. I went back to the living room and looked out the front window. It was dark, nobody outside, just a couple of yellow streetlights, empty yards. I sat down again, tried to settle back into my sleeping bag, but I kept thinking about the noise. I checked my phone. Barely any service. I told myself it had to be old pipes or the house settling, but I didn't really believe it. It was too loud, too clear. A minute later, it happened again. The same thump, maybe even a little closer. I jumped up, grabbed my phone again, and did another sweep of the house. This time I checked behind the couch, in the bathroom cabinet, even opened the bedroom closet, which was just full of dusty blankets. Still nothing. The house felt even smaller now. I turned all the lights on, just to be sure. Nothing looked out of place. No broken windows, no footprints, no sign that anybody but me had been here. The locked door bugged me, but I wasn't about to break it open. I was too tired for games. I checked the front door again, made sure the deadbolt was turned, and went back to the couch. I tried to ignore every new creak or pop the house made after that. I lay down, pulled my sleeping bag tight, and watched the TV flicker while I listened to the fridge humming. I set my alarm for sunrise, planning to leave as early as possible, and tried to ignore whatever was causing the noises. I fell asleep pretty quickly on the couch. My sleeping bag was comfortable enough. The TV was still playing faint static, and the hum of the fridge was like background noise I could fade into. I remember waking up once around 2 or 3 a.m. and checking the time on my phone, then rolling over. After that, I was out cold. Around what felt like dawn, maybe 6 or so, something woke me. Not a noise. Just that sharp feeling you get when someone's staring at you. I opened my eyes, and for a moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at. There was a man, mid-40s, unshaven, wearing a dirty sweatshirt and jeans. He was standing right beside the couch, looking straight down at me. Not moving, not saying anything. Just standing there. We locked eyes for half a second. Then he turned and sprinted for the front door. I heard the screen door slam open and the crash of bushes as he tore through them. I stayed frozen for a good 10 seconds, heart racing so hard it felt like my chest was going to explode. I couldn't even scream. I just kept staring at the door. When I could finally move, I sat up and immediately grabbed my car keys off the coffee table. I was about to bolt out the door when something made me stop. I don't know what it was. Just this tight, uneasy gut feeling that I needed to check the house one more time before leaving. Like I needed to make sure he was really gone. I turned around and looked down the hallway again. That's when I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A pull-down ladder, halfway lowered from the ceiling. It wasn't obvious last night, probably tucked up tight. But now it was hanging just enough to notice. I stood under it and looked up. The square ceiling panel was ajar, not fully open, like someone had used it recently and hadn't pushed it back in all the way. I reached up, pulled the ladder all the way down, and grabbed my phone to use the flashlight. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Old food, sweat, something sour. The second thing was the sight of a sleeping bag spread out in the corner of the attic floor. There were piles of crumpled clothes, food wrappers, empty bottles. I saw a half-broken phone charger, some receipts, and what looked like a torn magazine or book pages. This wasn't a forgotten storage space. Someone had been living up here. For how long? I didn't know. I backed down the ladder slowly, trying not to make a sound. My hands were shaking as I reached the floor. I didn't want to look at anything else. I didn't want to think about how he'd gotten in, how long he'd been up there, or if he'd been watching me the whole night from a crack in the ceiling. I just wanted to leave. I threw my stuff into the car so fast I don't even remember locking the house behind me. My heart was pounding the entire drive out of that town. I pulled into a gas station and sat there with the engine running, trying to calm down. Then I searched the nearest police station and drove straight there. The place was small, like the rest of the town. I walked in, trying to explain everything as calmly as I could, but I could hear my own voice trembling. I told them about the guy, the attic, the noises from the night before. One officer took notes, while the other leaned against the wall looking half asleep. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but I could tell they didn't think it was urgent. One of them even asked if maybe I imagined it because I was tired. I showed them pictures I took of the attic, the sleeping bag, the food wrappers. That got their attention for maybe 30 more seconds. Then they said they'd follow up with the property owner. I gave them the address and left. The Airbnb host messaged me later that day, apologizing, saying he had no idea anyone was squatting there, claimed it had never happened before, and offered me a refund. Said he'd look into it. I didn't respond. I left reviews on every platform the rental was listed. Not just about the man in the attic, but about the smell, the unlocked crawl spaces, how the house wasn't even safe to stay in. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. For days afterward, I kept replaying it in my head. Lying on that couch, asleep, completely unaware. No lock between me and that man. No warning before he could have done anything he wanted. The scariest part wasn't just that someone was hiding in the attic. It was that he waited. That he watched me sleep. Maybe for hours. Maybe longer. And I only saw him because I opened my eyes at just the right moment. I still think about that every night before I fall asleep. I work the night shift at Pine Valley Motel off I-95 in Florida. It's a small place, just 22 rooms in a line with the front office stuck on the end. My shift is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I mostly just watch the desk, run the books, and hand over keys to truckers and travelers who come in late. The office smells like old coffee and cleaning spray, and there's a radio behind the counter that mostly spits static unless I put it on the Spanish station. Most nights, it's dead quiet, except for the highway noise coming through the double-paned glass. The parking lot is all cracked blacktop, with a couple burned-out lamps that the owner keeps promising to fix. Last Wednesday, around 2 a.m., the phone rang. The sound startled me because I'd been half asleep in the faded rolling chair, the way you get when you've been staring at nothing for too long. The call came up as unknown number, and when I picked up, a man's voice asked about vacancies. His voice was rough and low, and he kept pausing, like he had to catch his breath. I could hear an engine running in the background, a steady hum. I said we had rooms open, and he wanted to know if any were left at the back, furthest from the road. The question stuck with me. Most people wanted closer to the office and the lot, for their cars. Before I could answer, he said, "I'll be there soon," and hung up. 10 minutes later, headlights cut through the parking lot, sweeping over the broken asphalt. A white sedan with a busted taillight pulled in fast, jerking into a spot at the edge. The car idled for a long minute, and I watched from behind the glass door. Finally, the driver got out. A tall guy, maybe late 30s, with dark hair plastered to his face. His jeans and jacket were soaked, like he'd been walking through rain, but it hadn't rained all night. He kept glancing over his shoulder, back at the lot and the car, before he walked up to the door and buzzed. I noticed mud on his boots and water dripping from his cuffs onto the mat. He came inside, bringing the smell of wet clothes and sweat with him. He didn't say hello, just asked for the room, furthest from the road. His voice was steadier in person, but he never really looked at me. His eyes kept darting to the windows and the side exit. The way he hunched over the desk made me uneasy. It was a weird kind of nervous energy, like he was waiting for someone to follow him in, or for me to call someone. Still, we needed the business, and the rules said if someone had money and ID, we took it. No questions. I slid the check-in form across the counter and asked for a license. He reached into his back pocket, moving slow, like his arms were stiff. The ID he handed over was an old Florida driver's license, the kind with the turquoise background. The picture was him, but his hair was longer now and his face looked thinner. I checked the expiration. 6 months overdue. Technically, that was a problem, but a lot of travelers let their licenses go a little past, especially the ones who paid cash. I flipped it back and forth in my hand. He put down a credit card next, one of those blue ones that look fake. I ran it once, then again, and both times it came back declined. He didn't even flinch. Just started digging in his jeans and pulled out a wad of cash, most of it damp and creased. It was all small bills, but it added up. As I counted it out, I noticed his hands were shaking a little. There were raw scratches across his knuckles and dirt packed deep under his fingernails, like he'd been grabbing at something rough, maybe even digging. There was a bruise on his wrist, purple and yellow, just visible under his jacket sleeve. While I processed the paperwork, he kept watching the window, shifting from foot to foot. Every time a car passed on the highway, he tensed, then forced himself to relax again. I finished the form, stapled his cash receipt to the copy, and slid him the key to room 18, the last one on the far corner. He grabbed it and left without another word. I watched him through the side window as he walked fast down the breezeway, past the vending machines and the ice machine, toward the dark end of the property. The white sedan was still running, headlights shining off into the scrubby patch of grass behind the lot. I stood by the door, staring out at the parking lot, waiting to see if anyone else was getting out. But no one did. I just watched him disappear around the corner at the back of the motel, water dripping in his wake. About 10 minutes after he disappeared around the corner, I started to relax, figuring he just wanted to be left alone. I was scrolling on my phone, half listening to the hum of the vending machines, when a sharp banging noise jolted me upright. It was too loud for the old ice maker or the pipes. I stood up and looked out the front window toward the row of rooms. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I caught movement by room 17, one door up from where I'd sent him. He was there, same tall guy in the wet jacket, pounding his fist and shoulder into the door, shouting. His voice was ragged, echoing down the walkway, and I realized he was yelling something about taking back what belonged to him. The words came out broken, desperate. His other hand kept slamming into the door, rattling it in its frame. Then, through the glass, I heard a woman scream from inside room 17. She was screaming for help, over and over, voice shrill and panicked. He started kicking the door, heel thudding against the wood, louder and louder each time. The banging got faster, frantic, and the woman's shouts kept getting sharper, now mixed with a child's cries. I reached for the panic button under the counter, something I'd never had to use before. I pressed it hard and then slammed the office door shut, twisting the lock. I moved to the back of the office, hands shaking. All I could do was listen to the chaos outside and pray the lock would hold if he turned his attention toward me. The sound of kicking and screaming filled the motel's hallway, making the walls vibrate. Every minute stretched on forever, but it was only about 15 minutes before the red and blue flashes cut across the dark lot. 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up fast, crunching over the gravel. 4 deputies jumped out, hands already on their weapons. They rushed toward room 17, shouting commands. The man was still kicking at the door, sweat soaking his shirt now, not even noticing the sirens at first. He didn't fight when they grabbed him, just slumped against the wall, breathing hard, like he'd finally run out of steam. The deputies pulled him away from the door and cuffed him. 2 of them talked quietly through the crack in room 17's door, trying to calm the woman inside. After a minute, she opened it. Her face was pale, eyes wide, holding a little girl tight to her chest. The woman was Linda, his ex-wife, and the girl their daughter. While the deputies checked them over, another officer asked me what happened. I told him everything I saw, the call, the strange questions, the way he kept looking out the window, and how he'd tried to pay. My voice sounded distant, like I was talking through a glass wall. It turned out Linda and the girl had checked in 2 days before, under a different last name. The divorce was 3 months old, and Linda had filed a restraining order, but he'd found them anyway. The deputies told me he'd used a location-sharing app on the kid's phone to track them here. Linda had picked our motel because it looked quiet, cheap, and anonymous. She'd thought she was safe, at least for a little while. When the deputies told her he was gone and couldn't hurt them tonight, she just nodded, still shaking. One of them helped her pack a few bags, and the other led her and the girl to a cruiser. After they left, I spent the next hour in the office with a deputy, writing out every detail of what I'd seen and heard. They bagged up the man's things from room 18, and one of them walked the parking lot, checking the cars for anything suspicious. I was so wired I didn't even notice the sun coming up until it was streaming through the window and making everything look strange and colorless. The man was charged with violating a restraining order, stalking, and making terroristic threats. The deputies told me Linda and her daughter would be moved to a shelter in another county, someplace out of reach. The owner came by that afternoon, pale and quiet, and said we'd be installing new deadbolts and putting up extra cameras in every hallway, even in the back by the vending machines. For weeks after, I jumped every time the phone rang late, or when someone knocked on the glass after midnight. Now, every time a guest pays with cash and glances over their shoulder too much, I watch them a little longer. I keep the panic button closer. People come to little places like ours to disappear, but that night taught me to trust the feeling in my gut when something's not right. I still work the night shift, but I never forget how quickly quiet can turn dangerous, and how just one wrong guest can change everything in a matter of minutes. Last spring break, my buddy Brandon and I drove up to Crater Lake in the Cascades for a 3-day camping trip. We left campus around noon and took the back highways, winding through miles of dense green forest. It was raining most of the way up, that light drizzle that seems to stick to the windshield even with the wipers on. Brandon played his usual playlist, mostly classic rock, and talked about how we both needed to get away after finals. My hands were sore from typing papers, and he just kept going on about how the air in the city felt heavy. The car smelled like energy drinks and old socks, and our gear was stuffed in the trunk, backpacks with all the food, a blue tent, the little propane stove we borrowed from his cousin, and way too many bags of chips. We stopped at a gas station an hour before the park, grabbed cheap coffee, and talked about how empty everything looked. I remember the attendant just stared at us as we drove off, barely nodding when Brandon said thanks. We got to the trailhead a bit before 3, and it was colder than I expected. The lot was empty, and all the other campsites on the way in looked closed off for the season. The trees there are massive, towering pines that cut out most of the sunlight, so it always feels a bit dim, even in the afternoon. We hiked about a mile in, our boots squishing into damp moss and needles, looking for a flat spot away from any big branches that could come down. There was a good clearing in a pine grove, maybe 100 yards from the water's edge. You could see the lake through the trees, just a slice of dark blue between all that green. The only sound was the wind, some crows, and the low hum of insects. We got the tent up quick, laid out the sleeping bags, and set the cooler near a fallen log. Brandon started working on the camp stove, grumbling that the propane wouldn't fit right, while I grabbed my hatchet and went looking for firewood before it got dark. I started walking the edge of the grove, boots crunching in the leaves, trying to spot any dead branches that weren't soaked through. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The air smelled like wet earth and pine sap, strong enough to sting your nose if you breathed in deep. I kept thinking about the essay I still hadn't turned in, just for a second, before focusing back on the ground. I spotted a few sticks and was about to turn back when I noticed someone moving between the trees, far off, maybe 200 feet away. At first, I just saw a shape, gray and green, blending in. I stopped moving and watched. The person wasn't on the trail. They were just kind of weaving around, stopping every so often to look through a pair of binoculars. I watched him for a minute, thinking maybe he was bird watching. It was a little weird though, because there aren't really trails out that way, just heavy underbrush. The guy never looked my way. He moved slow, careful, but not like he was looking for a bird. He kept looking all around, then staring out toward the lake, and sometimes up into the trees. I went back to camp, telling myself it was nothing. Brandon didn't seem worried. We made dinner, mac and cheese out of a pot, half burnt, half cold. It was already getting dark. The forest seemed to close in tight at night. We sat by the fire, listening to the crackle, not saying much. A few times I thought I heard branches snapping in the woods, but every sound gets louder when there's nothing else around. I looked at my phone, but there was no service. Brandon tried to joke about bears, but his voice sounded a little forced. I went down to the lake before bed just to check it out, flashlight cutting through the fog, and saw nothing. I kept thinking about that guy with the binoculars, but told myself it was just a hiker, maybe lost or just weird. Still, when we crawled into the tent, I zipped it all the way up, tight, and set the hatchet by my sleeping bag. We both woke up at some point in the night, hearing something moving through the brush, but it faded away after a minute. I listened hard, every muscle tense, but nothing happened. When the sun came up, the lake was covered in mist. We made breakfast, tried to warm up, and I told Brandon again about seeing that guy. He said maybe the guy camped somewhere else and had already left, but I wasn't sure. We hiked a bit after eating, just along the edge of the water, and found no signs of anyone. Still, I kept glancing back over my shoulder. The forest felt emptier than before, but also watched, like every sound bounced around, impossible to tell if it was animal or something else. After dark that second night, we sat by the fire, both of us jumpier than before. The wind was picking up, making the trees creak and groan overhead. Then, out of nowhere, we heard footsteps on the trail leading up from the water. I could see a shape coming through the shadows, someone in full camouflage, head to toe, blending in so well it was hard to spot him until he was right by the edge of the light. He stepped forward, hands open, and said, "Hey there. You guys mind if I ask you something?" His voice was calm, maybe 40 years old, deep lines in his face. He said his name was Tom and that he was out here hunting. He stood just at the edge of the firelight, not coming too close. He looked at our setup, at the cooler, the tent, our boots by the log, then back at us. He didn't have a rifle though, or any real gear. No backpack, no vest, nothing but the camo clothes and a hat. He asked if we knew how to get to Diamond Lake, acting like he was lost, but the way he said it was off. Diamond Lake was the next basin over, but we were only a few hundred yards from Crater Lake itself. Any local, or anyone who actually hunted out here, would know that right away. Brandon gave him rough directions, but Tom just nodded, staring past us at the fire, at the lake beyond. I noticed he wasn't carrying anything but the binoculars I'd seen earlier. His questions started to get stranger after that. He asked how long we planned to stay, what trail we came in on, and whether we'd seen anyone else around. He kept glancing at the tent and the cooler, eyes lingering too long on our gear. Brandon said, "Just here for the weekend, haven't seen anybody else." Tom didn't react, just kept looking around like he was trying to see if anyone was hiding in the trees. The whole time, I could hear the wind whistling through the branches above us, but it felt like the air had gone still. He shifted from foot to foot, asked if we'd had any trouble with animals, then if we'd heard anything strange last night. Every question was more specific than the last, and the way he asked felt wrong, too interested in the details. I tried not to look nervous, just poked at the fire and watched his hands. He didn't leave right away, just stood there, looking between us, then back over his shoulder, like he expected someone to show up. The fire popped, sending up sparks. Tom looked down at them, then said, "You guys sure you haven't seen anyone else?" And waited, eyes locked on mine, not blinking. Tom asked if we had any way to call for help, like a satellite phone, or if anyone knew exactly where we were camping. He sounded casual, but there was an edge to it. Brandon and I both shrugged it off and said our phones didn't work out here, which was true, and that our parents just knew we were at Crater Lake somewhere. We tried to keep things vague, not wanting to tell him anything useful. Tom didn't ask anything else for a minute, just stared at the fire, hands deep in his jacket pockets. He looked back over his shoulder, then at the sky, and finally said he should get moving before it got too late. He didn't say goodbye, didn't thank us, just faded back into the shadows. I watched the trees where he disappeared until I couldn't see any more movement. Brandon and I waited a few minutes, listening, but everything went quiet. The wind picked up, rattling the tent, and the fire started to die down. We both looked at each other, and neither of us had to say what we were thinking. Something about the whole thing was just wrong. Brandon kept glancing at the trail, and I started picking up anything that could be used as a weapon. A hatchet, the heavy flashlight, even the metal rod for the tent. Brandon said, "Let's just stay up for a while. We'll do shifts." I nodded and said I'd take the first one. He got into his sleeping bag, boots still on, and zipped up. I sat by the fire, knees up, watching the shadows between the trees, every muscle tight. Every so often I'd think I saw movement, but it was just branches shifting in the wind. The sky was overcast, no moon, just deep black above. An hour went by, then 2. Nothing. But after midnight, the air felt different, heavier, colder. I kept the fire going, poking at it now and then, listening for footsteps or voices. My heart was pounding every time I heard a twig snap or a gust of wind. I kept looking over my shoulder, sure there were eyes in the darkness. When it was Brandon's turn, I shook him awake and told him to keep his ears open. He nodded, face pale in the firelight, and I crawled into the tent, boots still on, hatchet in my hand. Sleep didn't come. I stared at the thin nylon, waiting, every sound making me jump. Time seemed to slow down to nothing. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I heard the soft crunch of footsteps outside the tent. Slow, careful, circling. I stopped breathing and listened. Brandon must have heard it too, because I felt him shift and press against the wall of the tent, holding his breath. The steps went around the tent once, then again. I could see a shadow moving through the moonless dark, just a darker shape against the faint orange of the dying fire. Someone crouched down by our gear. There was a soft rustle of zippers and the metallic clink of something being picked up. Brandon didn't move. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The shadow paused, stood, and moved to our cooler. More rustling. He was searching through everything, silent except for the occasional shift of weight or soft grunt. Brandon and I didn't have to say anything. We each grabbed our flashlights and counted quietly to 3. I unzipped the tent and lunged out, flicking the light right in the guy's face, yelling as loud as I could. Brandon jumped out behind me, doing the same. The man jerked up, eyes wide, and for half a second I saw it was Tom. Same camo, same binoculars, hands full of our food. He bolted instantly, dropping half the stuff, and crashed through the undergrowth, branches snapping as he pushed through the thicket. Brandon shouted after him, but he never looked back. We kept the lights trained on the trees, but he was gone within seconds, the only sound his frantic running fading into the dark. We didn't talk much after that, just packed up anything worth keeping and threw the rest into our backpacks. The fire was out by then. The night was dead silent except for the wind and our hurried movements. We decided to wait it out together, sitting back to back with our flashlights ready, weapons close by, until the first sign of dawn. I kept listening for more footsteps, but nothing came except the creak of the trees and the soft rush of the lake against the shore. Every once in a while, I thought I heard something, but it was just the forest settling. As soon as the first gray light came through the branches, we started breaking down camp. No breakfast, no coffee, just rolled up the tent and shoved everything into the car. The woods were cold and empty, and every step away from that grove felt like relief. Brandon looked over his shoulder every few seconds, but we didn't see anyone. The trail felt longer than before, every sound amplified in the early morning. I kept checking the path behind us, but there was no sign of Tom or anyone else. When we finally got back to the car, my hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys. The lot was still empty, our car the only one. We loaded up fast, slamming doors, locking everything. I checked under the car, behind the trees, but nothing. We didn't even talk until we hit the main road. Brandon just stared out the window, jaw tight. I kept replaying everything. What Tom asked, how he moved, the way he stared at our tent and our gear. It was obvious by then. The guy hadn't just been lost or hunting. He was checking us out, seeing what we had, asking if we could call for help, figuring out if we were alone. On the drive home, we talked it through, piecing together what had happened. Tom had been watching us since the afternoon, circling the camp, trying to see if we were vulnerable or worth the risk. When he realized we didn't have a way to call for help, no one knew exactly where we were, and we didn't have any backup. He must have decided to try something. He was after food, maybe gear, maybe worse. The fake hunter story was just a way to get close and gather information. The way he kept asking about other people, checking if we'd seen anyone, was him making sure we were alone. We reported the whole thing to the rangers as soon as we got to the nearest station. They took down everything we said, description, details, but we never heard back. I don't know if they ever found him, or if he moved on to someone else. After that, I stopped going to remote spots with just one other person. Now I stick to campgrounds with other people around, places with cell service, and always let someone know exactly where I am. I used to think the worst thing out there was bears or getting lost, but now I know there are people who look for easy targets, and they're the real danger. Some wilderness trips just aren't worth the risk, not because of animals, but because of the kind of people who blend into the shadows, waiting for you to let your guard down. I started working nights at the hydroelectric plant about a year ago, after my last job let me go. The place is small and sits on the side of a mountain, about 40 miles out from the nearest real town. The facility is fenced in all around, double-layer chain link topped with razor wire, and a big steel gate that stays locked except for staff. It's just me out there from 8 at night until 8 the next morning. The turbines run on their own most of the time. I'm supposed to check readouts every hour, fill out the logbook, and make sure nothing gets weird with the equipment. There's an emergency phone on the desk and a landline in the locker room, but cell service is spotty this far up. Most nights I stay in the main control room. There's a metal desk, a battered black office chair, a bank of screens with camera feeds, and a couple of gray metal cabinets full of binders and printouts. Sometimes I bring my own food, sometimes just coffee. The room hums from all the monitors, and there's a faint vibration from the turbines through the floor, almost like a heartbeat you can feel more than hear. It's quiet. At first, the quiet made me nervous, but I got used to it. The only real noises are wind, the distant churn of water, and sometimes the thump of a bird hitting the fence if the light draws them in. Every few hours, I make rounds with a big metal flashlight, just to keep myself from falling asleep. I check the outer doors, the equipment shed, and the generator room. Usually, I just log all clear and go back to the desk. The routine is steady. I read manuals, fill out paperwork, and watch old sitcoms on my phone when I get bored. The security cameras cover the gates, the generator, and the fence line. Most nights, I only see deer or the wind stirring up dust. Nothing really happens. But last Tuesday, something changed. I was at the desk, writing out a report for the day shift supervisor, when I heard this noise from outside. It was sharp and metallic. Not wind, not an animal. Metal scraping on metal, coming from the direction of the outer fence by the access road. I looked up at the live feeds, but the cameras on that side are grainy, and the corner near the tool shed is half blind after dark. The sound came again, scraping, then a heavy clunk, like something hitting the fence hard. I set my pen down and listened, holding my breath. My first thought was, maybe a bear. We get black bears up here sometimes, sniffing around the trash bins. But this was different. It was a regular rhythm. Scrape, then a pause, then another scrape. I stood up and stepped over to the narrow window that faces the road. The glass is reinforced, but not very clean. I could make out the shape of the fence, the arc lights throwing hard shadows. And that's when I saw him. There was a person on the other side of the fence, hunched over, working at something low to the ground. The razor wire glinted under the lights, and I realized the figure had cut a hole in the outer fence, about 3 feet wide, just above the base where the ground slopes up. He pushed himself through, crawling awkwardly, getting caught on the wire for a second before pulling free. There was a flash of something in his hand, a tool or a bar, and then he was inside the perimeter, standing up, looking around. For a second, I just watched. My mind didn't process it. There shouldn't have been anyone out there. We don't get visitors, and the only other employee was off shift, living 30 miles away. I backed away from the window and went to the camera controls, but the feeds flickered, not giving a clear angle. By the time I looked back, the guy had started moving towards the plant, sticking close to the fence, keeping low. I could see his shadow stretching on the gravel as he crossed into the area near the generator shed. I ducked behind the desk, not sure what to do next. The emergency phone was right there, but I hesitated, not wanting to call in something if it was just a drunk hiker or a lost hunter. But the way the guy moved, fast and jittery, like he knew exactly where he was going, made my skin crawl. I kept out of sight, peeking through the edge of the window. I could see him now, coming across the lot, clothes torn and streaked with dirt, face shining with sweat. He stopped under the arc light, bent over, and looked right at the main door. He had a homemade knife, just a strip of metal taped around one end to make a handle. His other hand was bleeding from a fresh cut, probably from the razor wire. I saw him clutch the wound, smear blood on his shirt, and then look over his shoulder, like he thought someone else was coming. His head jerked back and forth, eyes wide and wild in the half-dark. He didn't look angry exactly, more like desperate, as if he'd run a long way and was terrified of what was behind him. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying to remember if I'd locked the side door after my last round. I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel outside, then the rattling of the door handle. It held. I heard him muttering. Couldn't catch the words, but the tone was urgent. Then he banged the knife against the door, once, twice, like he wanted to scare me into opening up. Suddenly he shouted, voice cracking, "Give me your keys! I know you're in there!" He jabbed the knife at the glass, leaving a smear of blood. "Throw them out, or I'll break in. I need the Jeep. I need your phone. Now." He pressed himself against the door, panting hard, his eyes darting everywhere, back at the fence, down the road, up at the security camera over the door. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, twitching, never standing still for more than a second. He looked thinner up close, skin tight over his face, hair matted down with sweat and dirt. The blade in his hand shook, not steady at all. "Keys." "Now," he said, almost whispering, but sharp enough to make it through the glass. His free hand fumbled at the door, leaving streaks of blood, then clutched his chest as he kept glancing over his shoulder into the darkness outside, like he expected someone to follow. He started rooting through my desk drawers, opening them one by one. He found the toolbox I keep under the desk for quick repairs: duct tape, spare batteries, screwdrivers, a flashlight, and a half roll of electrical tape. He grabbed the tape and looked at me, breathing hard, his eyes all glassy and wild. "Don't make this worse," he said, voice thin and shaking. He motioned me away from the desk with the knife. I did what he asked. He told me to sit in my chair, then yanked my arms behind my back. He wrapped the electrical tape tight around my wrists until the circulation started to go numb, then wound it around the arms of the chair. The whole time he kept apologizing under his breath. "Sorry, man. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for any of this. I just need to disappear, okay? I just need some time." He wasn't rough. He taped my legs to the chair, then checked that the knots were tight. He stared at the floor, almost mumbling to himself. He patted me down for my wallet and took it out of my back pocket, flipping through the cards, then tossed it on the desk. He took my phone and stuffed it into his own pocket, then reached over and grabbed the keys to the company Jeep hanging on the hook by the door. His hands were still shaking, blood dripping down his arm and onto the floor. He looked at me, chest heaving. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just need to get out of here. I messed up bad. I have to go." He limped to the door, glancing back one more time, then slipped outside. I heard the Jeep alarm chirp as he hit the unlock button. I struggled against the tape, twisting my wrists, but it was wrapped tight. I managed to turn my chair toward the window and watched him limp across the gravel lot. He climbed into the Jeep, started it up with a cough of the engine, and floored it down the access road, dust kicking up in the headlights. He took the turn too fast but kept going, taillights disappearing around the bend toward the highway. The whole encounter probably lasted 10 minutes. It felt like an hour. The office was dead quiet except for the low whine of the security screens and the faint sound of my own breathing. My hands were tingling from the tape. I tried to twist them loose, using the edge of the chair, working at the tape until it started to peel away. It hurt like hell, but I kept at it, flexing my fingers, pulling against the sticky mess. It took close to an hour before I finally got one hand free. I pulled off the rest of the tape and stood up, legs stiff and aching. I checked outside. Nothing but darkness and empty gravel. I picked up the emergency radio, flipped it on, and called into dispatch. My voice was shaky, but I kept it brief. Just the facts. Armed intruder, vehicle stolen, suspect description. They connected me to state police, who took the details and said they'd put out a bolo on the Jeep. I gave them the direction he'd left and a rundown of what happened. The security cameras had caught everything. I went back through the footage while waiting for a response. Grainy black and white images showing the man cutting the fence, climbing through, threatening me, taping me up, and taking the keys. It was all there, clear enough to make out his face in the harsh arc light outside the door. By morning, the police had run the images through their database and matched him to previous arrests. Petty theft, assault, a handful of mugshots going back years. He wasn't some professional criminal. The police said he'd messed up a robbery in Denver the day before, tried to hold up a small bank, got shot in the arm, then disappeared into the foothills when he couldn't get far. He'd been wandering for days, injured, no money, no food. Desperation brought him to the plant. He made a few stops on the way out of the mountains, gas stations, roadside stores, Each one caught him on their cameras. The cash from the bank was almost gone by then, spent on gas, food, and some first aid supplies. He kept moving, but it wasn't fast enough. 8 hours after the break-in, they caught him at a truck stop over the state line. The Jeep was in the lot, streaked with mud and blood on the driver's door. He tried to run, but he was too weak to get far. The police cuffed him and called it in. They recovered my phone, my wallet, the Jeep, and what was left of the evidence. The only thing missing was the bank money, most of it already spent or lost along the way. I watched the news that night from the control room, not sure what I was supposed to feel. The guy got 15 years for armed robbery, car theft, and assault. The plant replaced the section of fence and added more lights near the access road. My routine went back to normal. But sometimes, when I checked the cameras at 2 in the morning, I'd think about him walking up out of the dark. Tired, scared, out of options, just trying to disappear. It doesn't take much to destroy your life. One bad night, one wrong move, and you end up running for years, always looking over your shoulder, never getting away. When I was 28, I was the manager of a grocery store in this rundown strip mall out on the edge of town. It was one of those big, windowless places with buzzing lights and stained linoleum floors. I'd been there almost 2 years, and even though the hours sucked, it felt like a steady job. I always opened at 5 a.m., which meant I'd get there while it was still pitch black out, fumble with my keys at the back door, and go in alone before my staff arrived at 6. Most days started exactly the same. That Tuesday morning, everything looked normal at first. Parking lot empty except for a couple of dented cars left overnight. The humming from the big fridge units out back. My key stuck a little in the door, like usual. But when I got inside and clicked the lights, I could feel the stale chill of the place settle on me. I went through the loading area, checking the freezer doors, then down the narrow hallway toward the office. That's when I noticed the office door was unlocked. I stopped and looked at it for a second. Brad, our closing manager, always locked up after counting out the register drawers. He's the kind of guy who double-checks things, especially after he got written up for leaving the back gate unlatched last spring. So, seeing that door cracked open made me pause. I figured maybe he was tired or rushing to leave. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing obviously wrong, just that little metal lock hanging loose. I told myself it was nothing, just Brad spacing out, and stepped inside the hallway. The air felt stuffy and still. My shoes squeaked on the cheap carpet. That's when I heard something, like papers being shuffled around. It was coming from Linda's little cubicle in the back corner. The accounting spot with the overstuffed filing cabinet and the broken plastic chair. I slowed down, holding my breath, thinking maybe Brad had come in early for some reason, but it was way too quiet. I walked up to the doorway, my heart thumping a little faster, and peered inside. There was a guy bent over Linda's desk, his back to me, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up. He was digging through a pile of folders, spreading out sheets of paper on the desk. For a second, I just stood there, my hand frozen on the doorframe, not even sure what I was looking at. The guy didn't seem to notice me. He moved quickly, not rummaging like someone who's lost, but sorting like he knew what he was looking for. There was this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, like something was off. It wasn't just a kid looking for cash or an addict after loose change. He was too calm. I was still trying to decide if I should shout or back out and call someone when he turned around. He pulled the hood down a bit and I saw his face. For a second, I couldn't believe it. It was Ricky Thompson. He used to work for me as a cashier. We'd fired him about 6 months ago for stealing from the register, after a whole mess of shortages and a couple of weird late shifts. The last couple weeks before we let him go, He'd started acting strange, coming in early, hanging around after his shift ended, always asking to stay late or cover for other people. It was clear now he'd been up to something all along, but seeing him there, in the office, caught me so off guard I just stared. Ricky looked at me and grinned, like we were old friends bumping into each other at the gas station. He held up one of the bank statements from Linda's desk and kind of waggled it at me. I stepped back, my foot catching on the edge of the carpet, trying to put some space between us. Ricky's smile faded and he reached into his pocket. That's when he pulled out a folding knife, the kind you buy at a hardware store. He flicked it open and pointed it at me, still holding the bank statement in his other hand. "Don't even think about leaving," he said, his voice flat and calm, not loud, but not quiet either. I froze, my hand half raised, not sure what to do. I took another slow step back toward the door, but Ricky moved with me, the knife steady, blocking my way. He told me again, not raising his voice, not shouting, just matter of fact, I wasn't going anywhere. As soon as Ricky stepped forward, I bolted. I sprinted down the hallway, ducking around the supply closet, and burst through the double doors out into the produce section. My shoes slipped a little on the waxed floor, but I kept going, my breath burning in my chest. Ricky came after me, footsteps echoing hard, shouting my name like we were old friends playing some twisted game of hide and seek. I dodged left at the bakery, heading toward the registers, but I could see him out of the corner of my eye. He knew this place as well as I did. He cut through the aisles, quick and low, trying to cut me off at the end cap by the soda coolers. I veered the other way, pushing past a stack of cardboard boxes someone left by the freezer. I pulled my phone out and punched in 911, pressing it to my ear even as my hand shook. The operator picked up and I tried to keep my voice steady, whispering our address and telling them someone was inside the store with a knife. The dispatcher kept talking, voice calm and steady, asking me to stay on the line, to stay hidden if I could. I kept moving, ducking into the storage room near the back, closing the door as quietly as I could. I heard Ricky's voice, muffled but getting closer, calling my name in a sing-song tone, as if he was enjoying every second of this. He was walking up and down the aisles, opening cooler doors, knocking things off shelves. I kept the phone pressed tight to my ear and crouched low, heart racing, listening as he called out, "Come on, I just want to talk." He was circling, moving slow and methodical, checking every row. I crawled behind a pallet stacked with shrink-wrapped cases of canned green beans and tried not to make a sound. The smell back there was a mix of cardboard, dust, and old onions. I tried to slow my breathing so he wouldn't hear me. The only light came from the high windows and a single flickering bulb overhead. I heard Ricky muttering to himself, footsteps scuffing just beyond the storage racks. He said he'd been planning this for months, laughing low and weird under his breath. He said he knew all our routines, every single one. He'd been sleeping in the building sometimes, on weekends when nobody was around, and nobody noticed. The security cameras in the storage area had been busted for weeks. No one ever bothered to fix them. He was talking louder now, like he was narrating his own story, saying he knew exactly when the cash drop would happen and that the police would never get there in time. I pressed myself tighter against the wall and watched the little red LED on my phone, still connected to the dispatcher, and tried to focus on the sound of sirens in the distance. The blue and red lights flashed through the gaps above the loading dock door, getting closer. Ricky must have heard them too, because he started cursing, his voice suddenly frantic. I could hear him running toward the back, past the produce coolers and the bread racks, trying to find a way out. From where I crouched, I saw him climb up onto a stack of boxes and try to shove open the window above the loading dock. He was clutching a big manila folder, and papers were falling everywhere. Bank statements, deposit slips, payroll sheets. The police were pounding on the front door, voices shouting, I stayed behind the pallet, knees aching, as the dispatcher kept saying, "Help was right outside. Just stay down. Just stay quiet." Ricky managed to get the window open halfway, throwing out handfuls of papers, scrambling to squeeze himself through. 2 officers rushed around the building to the back, flashlights and guns drawn. I heard them yell for him to stop. He tried to climb out, still clutching the folder, but got stuck halfway. They pulled him down hard, pinning him to the concrete. The folder burst open and papers scattered everywhere, blowing across the empty loading dock. One of the officers called out to see if anyone else was inside, and I stood up, finally able to breathe, legs shaking. Later, during the investigation, we learned Ricky had been living in the store's storage room off and on for almost 2 months. He survived on expired snack cakes, broken boxes of cereal, and anything he could scrounge from the returns cart. He kept a little sleeping area tucked behind the tall shelves, hidden under a pile of old uniforms and cardboard. He watched us every day, learning our routines, making notes on who left when, who counted the cash, which doors never quite locked all the way. He knew exactly when I'd be alone in the morning and planned to take the deposit, slip out the back and disappear before the staff arrived. At his court hearing, I sat in the back row as they read out the details, how he'd mapped out every step, watched us for weeks, waiting for the perfect time. I still work at that store, but it's not the same. Every morning I check every corner and every shadow before I turn off the alarm. I watch the office door, the broken cameras, the half-lit loading dock. It's just habit now. You never know who's been watching your routine or how long they've been waiting for you to slip up. I was still in uniform when dispatch sent me to the Birchwood Apartments on a welfare check. I didn't know the name Carol Jenkins at all. Just another name on the sheet, another caller saying someone hadn't picked up their phone, and some neighbors moaning about music at all hours. I'd done maybe 50 of these checks before. It's usually a dead battery or somebody passed out from a hangover, nothing more. The building was one of those old 4-story brick boxes with narrow halls that always smelled like microwaved noodles and bleach. The elevator was out again, so I took the stairs to the 2nd floor, reading over the call notes on my phone. Last seen 3 days ago, sister called it in, neighbors annoyed. I found 15B down the hall, green numbers nailed crooked on the door, music thumping low behind it. The hallway felt hotter than outside, thick air pressing on my neck. As I raised my hand to knock, the music shut off so fast it left a ringing in my ears. I knocked, then knocked again, louder. There was movement, a clatter, a scraping chain, quick breathing on the other side. When the door finally cracked, the security chain pulled tight. I saw a slice of a woman's face, eyes rimmed red and half hidden behind messy hair. I introduced myself. She didn't answer right away, just stared. I could smell old sweat and cigarettes coming from inside. After a second, she asked, "What do you want?" Her voice came out hoarse, like she hadn't talked in a while. "Your sister asked me to check in. She's worried about you," I said. She kept one hand tight on the door, the other clutching the edge like she might slam it shut any second. I noticed she wasn't looking at me. Not really. She kept glancing back into the room behind her, shoulder twitching. The air from inside felt sticky, heavy with stale beer and something sharper underneath. I asked if she was okay. She nodded too fast, still watching the darkness over her shoulder. The hallway was silent except for her fast breathing and the hum of the building's air unit rattling above us. "Are you alone in there, Carol?" I kept my voice low, trying not to sound threatening. She nodded again, but her eyes slid past me, scanning the hallway as if someone else might be hiding just out of view. I could see the edge of a dirty blanket on the floor and a stack of dishes piled on a chair behind her. There were marks on her arm, scratches, some red, some older. Her fingers were shaking on the door chain. She blinked hard, then said, "You can't be here. They don't like it when cops come around. I didn't call anyone." Her voice was thin, but the words tumbled out quick, as if she'd been rehearsing them. I asked if she needed any help, but she only shook her head again. "I just want to make sure you're safe," I said, keeping my hands at my sides. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. There was a crash inside the apartment. Something falling over, a bottle maybe. She jumped, knuckles white on the door. I asked again, "Is anyone else with you?" She mumbled no, looking past me toward the stairwell. I tried to see more through the crack, but it was mostly darkness and clutter. She started to close the door but paused, her eyes darting left and right. "They watch this place," she whispered, "from across the street. I know they do. They follow me when I go out. Every day. I see them in the parking lot. You're not here to help. They send you to check if I'm still talking." She was speaking faster, breath hitching. The door was trembling in her grip. I told her I just wanted to talk, just to make sure everything was all right. After a long pause, she let out a shuddering sigh and undid the chain. The door swung open and I stepped inside, careful to stay where she could see me. The apartment was a mess. Old pizza boxes stacked in the corner, beer bottles rolling on the carpet, every surface covered with dirty plates, paper towels, and empty takeout containers. The smell was a slap: alcohol, sweat, something rotten. Curtains were duct taped to the window. The couch was flipped on its side, cushions torn open. Broken glass crunched under my boots as I moved. Carol hovered by the door, back pressed against the wall, hands moving over her arms. She looked smaller inside, bones sharp under her skin. Her hair was greasy and tangled. She glanced at the windows, then at the TV, which was unplugged and pushed up against the wall. "Don't stand by the window," she hissed, her eyes wild. "They can see us if you stand there." I stayed by the door, scanning the room. I asked her to sit down, but she just shook her head. "They follow me to work. They watch me every morning. I know it. Sometimes I see the same car. Sometimes it's someone walking. They pretend they're just out for a walk, but they're not. They want to catch me." She started pacing, barefoot over broken glass, mumbling to herself. I tried to calm her, saying I wasn't part of anything, that her sister just wanted to check on her. She stopped, whipping around, eyes narrowed. "You have a radio. They can hear what you say. You tell them where I am." Her voice climbed higher, panic sharp. She rushed to the coffee table, grabbed a half-broken beer bottle, and pointed it at me with a shaking hand. "Don't come any closer. You're lying. You work for them. You all do." She backed into the corner, brandishing the glass, her chest heaving. I kept my hands up, open. "I don't want to hurt you. I'm just here because your sister asked. No one else." Carol didn't listen. She started yelling, voice breaking. "You're not a real cop. You're with them. You want to shut me up. That's why you're here." Her voice echoed through the apartment, raw and desperate. She waved the broken bottle at me, slashing the air. I could see her knuckles bleeding where the glass bit into her skin. Furniture blocked the way behind her. She had piled chairs and a lamp across the back door. The fridge was half open, food spilling out, the shelves nearly empty. In the corner, a phone charger dangled from the wall, unplugged. She kept screaming, backing further away, wild eyes darting around the room. I saw the blood on her hand and the torn fabric on her leg. "Stay away," she shrieked. "You're not getting me." "You're not—" She tripped on a pile of magazines, nearly falling, but caught herself, still holding the jagged bottle out like a weapon. I didn't move. I watched her shoulders shake, her eyes tracking every move I made, sweat streaking her face. The smell of stale beer, garbage, and fear pressed in on all sides. I listened for sounds from the hallway, but all I could hear was her ragged breathing and the glass crunching under her bare feet. I tried to talk her down, but her eyes were glassy and distant, like she wasn't even hearing the words. She kept muttering under her breath, something about wires in the ceiling and, "They know I'm talking to you." I took a step forward and she lunged, swinging the broken bottle fast. It caught my forearm before I could back off, slicing a clean line through the skin. Not deep, but enough to sting hard and start bleeding down my wrist. I grabbed her wrist and twisted gently, trying to get the glass out of her hand without making it worse. She fought back harder than I expected. Knees, elbows, fingernails, screaming in short, sharp bursts that bounced off the walls. I had to wrestle her down to the floor, one knee to her shoulder, one arm locking her other hand behind her back. "Stop, Carol. You're okay. I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't listen. She kicked and twisted beneath me, shouting about the cameras again, calling me a liar, saying I was part of it, part of all of it. I could feel the blood from my arms soaking into the sleeve of my uniform. I radioed in for backup and requested medical assistance. My voice came out calmer than I felt. I told dispatch she was restrained but unstable. I was worried she'd hurt herself next. She was sobbing now, head turned to the side, saying over and over, "They hear me. Through the walls. I know they do. I hear them whispering when I sleep." I stayed with her on the floor until the paramedics arrived. She kept crying, eyes squeezed shut, body shaking in short tremors every time someone knocked or opened a door in the hallway. I backed off slowly once the medics were ready. They had to sedate her before they could lift her onto the stretcher. Her wrists were scraped raw from fighting. Her face was streaked with tears and sweat. I gave my statement to the responding unit and let the EMTs clean my arm while I filled out paperwork in the hallway. Before they wheeled her out, she locked eyes with me just for a second and whispered, "They live above me now. I hear them talking at night." Then she shut her eyes and didn't say anything else. While we waited for the ambulance, she'd kept talking, more like ranting, and I wrote down what I could. She talked about the vents, said they had cameras inside. Tiny black dots in the corners. "They blink when I walk past," she said. She was convinced someone had spliced into the building's wiring. "They cut through the pipes to run cables. I can hear them when I turn the faucet on." The more she talked, the more I saw the patterns. Her paranoia wasn't just random noise. She knew things. Her neighbors' names, their car models, their license plates. She knew who left for work at what time, who picked up groceries on Thursdays, who had guests over on weekends. She'd memorized their lives like someone watching a series on TV. "Apartment 15A always has the blinds shut. Why do you think that is? Huh? Think about it." Then she'd glance at the walls like they were listening in. She said they were punishing her, that she used to be normal until they found out what she knew. When I asked what she meant, she got quiet and just whispered, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." I didn't press. The more she talked, the more I noticed how often she mentioned her old job. They fired me because I figured it out. They knew I was watching. That's when everything started. I asked when she lost the job, and she said 3 weeks ago. "That's when the drinking started too," she admitted. "It helps me sleep, but it makes the voices worse." She didn't laugh when she said it. She didn't blink either. By the time she got to the hospital, she was mostly silent. The psychiatric team took her in on a 72-hour hold, maybe longer depending on their assessment. Her sister flew in that night, and I met her outside the apartment the next day. She looked exhausted. Said Carol had always been a little intense, but not like this. "She's been off for a while," she told me. "I should have come sooner." She had a spare key and asked if I could wait while she cleaned up a little. Inside, the place looked even worse in daylight. Trash stacked in the sink, cigarette burns on the carpet, broken electronics shoved into a corner like they'd been dismantled looking for bugs. The bedroom walls were covered in notebook pages, lists of names, addresses, surveillance notes. Her sister just stood there, hands covering her mouth. 2 days later, I got a call from the building manager. He wanted to file a formal report. "It's been building up for months," he said. Turns out, Carol had been slipping notes under neighbors' doors. Notes that said things like, "I hear you talking about me. I'm not stupid," and "Stop watching me or I'll call the police." Several tenants had complained, saying she followed them to their cars. One woman said Carol stood outside her door for an hour once, just breathing. Another tenant moved out 3 weeks ago because Carol started screaming at him in the laundry room. That was the same week she lost her job. The manager said they didn't want to evict her while she was clearly struggling. She always paid rent, never late. But man, she scared people. Her decline wasn't sudden. The drinking made things worse, but the fixation on the neighbors, watching, recording, writing, had started long before that. There were patterns to it, timelines. She had spiral notebooks full of observations, like she thought she was conducting her own investigation. When people call for wellness checks, they're usually worried someone's in trouble. But every so often, you get one like this, where the person in trouble is also the reason others are scared. Carol got help. She's in a facility now. Her sister calls in updates sometimes, tells us she's taking medication, says she's calmer. But I keep thinking about the notebooks, the cameras she imagined in the vents, the notes under doors. I keep thinking about how close she was to doing something worse. I keep thinking about what would have happened if her sister had waited just one more week to call. Last summer, I was driving from Texas to Wyoming to visit my family. I had about 1,000 miles to cover, and I'd done this trip before, but usually stuck to the main highways. This time I decided to take back roads once I got into Nebraska to skip all the construction and the endless line of semis. The first part of the drive was easy, flat, straight roads, not much traffic, and I liked having old country radio on in the background. By the time I reached western Nebraska, the sky was getting dark and a storm was rolling in. Not just a normal thunderstorm either. It started pouring, and it was the kind of rain that beats so hard against your windshield, you can barely see the yellow lines in front of you. My wipers were going as fast as they could, and it was still hard to see. I had to slow down a lot, and I started to worry about hydroplaning, since the roads out there don't have a lot of drainage. I kept looking for a gas station or a truck stop, somewhere to pull over and just wait it out. But there was nothing but empty fields, and a couple old barns sitting back from the road. The last town I passed was probably 50 miles behind me. My gas gauge had been dropping, but I'd figured I'd get to the next decent-sized place before filling up. Now it was hovering just above empty, and the rain was only getting worse. It felt like I'd miscalculated. My phone didn't have a signal, and the GPS was frozen on the same stretch of road I'd been on for the last half hour. The highway was starting to look more and more rural, with potholes and gravel at the shoulder, and every mile I drove, the less sure I felt that I was going the right way. I remember passing a sign that was so faded, I could only make out the word gas and an arrow pointing off to the right. It was the first sign of any kind I'd seen for an hour, so I took it without thinking much. The road it led me down was pure gravel, kicking up wet dust behind me, and it twisted through a small patch of trees before opening up to a wide, empty lot. There was a single-story building with a flat roof, the kind of gas station you'd see in an old movie, and 2 gas pumps out front. Both were covered in rust, and the lights overhead flickered as the wind blew the rain sideways. A few cars might have been parked along the side, but it was hard to tell in the gloom. The station's sign was cracked, and most of the letters were missing, but I could still make out service and food. I parked under the overhang near the pumps and waited a few minutes, just listening to the rain drumming on the roof. My hands were clenched on the steering wheel, and I kept checking my mirrors for other cars, but no one else came down the road. The lot was covered in puddles that looked almost black in the dying light. I tried the gas pump on the right first, but the nozzle was taped up and the digital screen was dark. The left pump wasn't much better. The display flickered when I pressed a button, but then died completely. I looked for a card reader, but there was just a slot with a broken flap hanging loose. I tried jiggling the nozzle anyway just in case, but nothing happened. The handle was cold and slick, and when I lifted it, I saw a line of spiderwebs stretched across the gap where the hose met the pump. At this point, I was starting to get really uncomfortable. The rain wasn't letting up, and my gas light had finally turned on. There were no other cars around. I saw a faint yellow glow coming from the windows of the station's convenience store, so I grabbed my wallet and ran inside, pulling my jacket over my head. My shoes squelched on the wet concrete as I hurried through the door. Inside, the lights were on, but most of the store was a mess. There were rows of empty metal shelves, some toppled over, and scattered boxes of chips and candy, their bags torn open. A few coolers lined the wall, but the doors were hanging open, and the inside was dark. The air had a heavy, musty smell, like old mop water, and something burned. There was no one at the counter. Behind it, there was a door leading into a back room, and that's where I noticed a strange glow. Someone had plugged a lamp into a wall socket in the back, and it cast this weird yellow light onto the floor. The lamp looked homemade, built from old pipes and a car battery, and the cord snaked out across the floor through a pile of broken glass and spilled soda bottles. At first, I thought maybe the place was just closing down, or they were remodeling, but the more I looked, the less sense it made. The register was open and empty. Half the ceiling tiles were missing. There was an old microwave on the counter, door dangling, and beside it a pile of dirty dishes and cans. Whoever was using the back room wasn't trying to hide it either. There were plastic grocery bags full of clothes stacked against the wall, and a mattress in the corner, half covered by a greasy blanket. On the counter, I saw a stack of cheap instant noodle cups and a few dirty plastic forks. Someone had been living there for a while. That's when I realized I hadn't seen or heard another person since I'd pulled up. No one in the parking lot. No one behind the counter. I stepped back and listened, but all I could hear was the rain hitting the windows and a faint buzzing from the lamp in the back. I felt my skin crawl. The place was abandoned, but it wasn't empty. Someone had made it into a home, and they were probably still around. I looked back at the door, and that's when I saw a set of muddy boot prints coming in from the side entrance, leading right past the counter toward the back room. As soon as I saw the man by my car, I froze. He was tall and thin, with wet, patchy clothes clinging to his frame. His hair was stringy and dripping down into his face, and he was cupping his hands to look through my window like he was checking for something specific. I shouted, loud enough to be heard over the rain, something like, "Hey, what are you doing?" He didn't turn around. But the second I spoke, another guy came sprinting out of the gas station, his boots splashing through the puddles, heading straight for me. His face was pale and tight like he hadn't slept in days. His arms were swinging fast, and I saw something long and dark in his hand, maybe a crowbar or a tire iron. I didn't wait to see more. I ran straight for my car. The first guy finally noticed me and started yelling, but I didn't stop. I slammed into the driver's side door, yanked it open, and dove in. Before I could close it, The second guy was right there, slashing the side of my car with whatever he was holding. I got the door shut just as he hit it again. I started the engine, tires spinning on the wet gravel, and punched the gas. The car fishtailed but then caught traction and shot forward. I didn't look back until I was already halfway down the road, the rain still blurring everything in the rearview mirror. When I did, I saw them both still chasing after me on foot. For a second, I thought they were gaining, but after about 50 yards they slowed and finally stopped, just standing there in the rain, watching me disappear into the trees. I didn't let off the gas until the gravel road reconnected with the main highway. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheels straight. The fuel light had been on for a while, and I knew I wasn't going to make it much farther. I tried to calm down, hoping I'd hit another town soon. I drove another 40, maybe 50 miles, gripping the wheel tight and watching the needle sink lower until the engine sputtered and died. I coasted to the side of the road, completely out of gas, surrounded by nothing but fields and the occasional fence post. The rain had finally stopped, but it left a thick gray fog hanging in the air. My phone had 1 bar of signal. I called for a tow truck and waited with the doors locked. When the truck showed up, the driver was in his 60s, with a worn face and a reflective vest over his flannel shirt. He didn't say much at first, just loaded my car onto the flatbed. While we were driving, I asked him if he knew anything about the gas station back down that gravel road. He glanced at me sideways. "That place," he said, "closed down about 8 years ago. Owner went bankrupt. Nothing's out there now except broken pumps and mold." I told him I'd gone inside. Told him about the trash, the back room, and the 2 men. He went quiet for a second. "Yeah," he said. "I've heard stories. Sometimes homeless folks hole up in old buildings like that. Attics too. That area's had problems for a while. Not many people driving through anymore." I asked if there had been any trouble, and he nodded slowly. "Couple reports. Some travelers got robbed. One guy said someone tried to open his car door while he was filling up. Another had his wallet stolen when he went inside to use the bathroom. Cops check it every now and then, but people always move on before they show up." He didn't say much else, and I didn't ask. By the time we reached the next town, my nerves were shot. I got the car dropped at a repair place and checked into a cheap motel with fluorescent lights and thin blankets. The next morning, I went to the police station and told them what happened. They already seemed familiar with the location. An officer jotted down the details, nodded a few times, and said they'd send someone to check it out. Later that week, I got a call back. They'd gone out to the station. No one was there when they arrived, but they found the same setup I saw. A mattress, some cans, plastic forks, clothes. Someone had definitely been staying there. No IDs, no names. Just evidence of people passing through. The officer told me I'd probably looked like an easy target. Out-of-state plates. Alone. Small car. "They watch for that kind of thing," he said. "You were lucky." The scrape on my car door was deep. It cost $300 to fix. The mechanic said it looked like it had been done with metal, maybe a screwdriver or a pry bar. I ended up searching online later, curious. Found 3 forum posts from other drivers, all within the last year. One guy said someone chased his car in the rain. Another said they found their back window shattered after stopping there for directions. A third mentioned hearing footsteps in the trees near the station before driving off. It's easy to dismiss small towns and back roads as boring or harmless. But now, I don't take that chance. Before every trip, I top off my tank. I keep a second phone charger in the glove box. I don't stop unless I see working lights, other customers, real pavement. I don't assume any place is as safe as it looks. That night still plays in my head sometimes. Those 2 men standing at the edge of the trees, watching my car disappear. They weren't surprised. They weren't angry. Just patient. Like they'd wait for the next one.